Ivan and Antoinette arrived at a large underground space. It was a forgotten part of the Dreadford subway that was abandoned a long time ago. It had plenty of sitting spots and a pulpit. A large pool full of blood was the centerpiece, and a large standing mirror decorated the back of the space overseeing it all. The entire place was illuminated by a reddish light. At a table, the woman picked up a violin which she toyed with, tuning it by ear.
At last we are done with our task. It really did not feel so important as to take the two of us to complete it. Any group of newborns could have defeated that sorcerer. We did not need 2 archons. He was a fool, and that child of his was not worthy of much attention.
No task is too low for our cause, Antoinette, for our mission is pure, and we must give it our hearts and minds. The sorcerer was strong and he had to die, but our mission was not only one of reaping.
Ivan, you are too lenient if you feel your time is not better spent on matters other than kidnapping women and murdering cretins.
You are powerful, Antoinette. Very powerful. I do not remember a Nosferatu like you at such a young age. It's not been long since you received the gift of Babylon.
I am the child of the progenitor of my house. He was the very first of his blood to arrive here in Dreadford, one of the Nosferatu who instituted the tower in this city.
I know, my dear. I was there and saw it all happen. Those were promising times. The word of the founders being brought into the new world. But tell me, where is he now?
The woman remained in silence.
You lost your sire too early. You know little about our history and purpose. Despite your power, you lack experience. I have some time now before my assignment with Akasha. Please, if you will, sit and let me tell you a tale.
Ivan said while sitting and waiting for the woman. Antoinette stared at him for a few seconds and put her violin on a nearby table before she sat near Ivan. The preacher began by quoting the Book of Enoch by heart.
And Azazel taught men to make swords and knives and shields and breastplates, and made known to them the metals of the earth and the art of working them, and bracelets and ornaments and the use of antimony, and the beautifying of the eyelids, and all kinds of costly stones, and all coloring tinctures. And there arose much godlessness. And they were led astray, and became corrupt in all their ways. Semyaza taught enchantments and root cuttings, Armaros the resolving of enchantments, Parakijal astrology, Kokabel the constellations, Ezekiel the knowledge of the clouds, Arakiel the signs of the earth, Shamsiel the signs of the sun, and Sariel the curse of the moon. And as men perished, they cried, and their cry went up to heaven.
Antoinette paid attention to the names of the angels, their divine ancestors, as it was taught inside the tower. She also knew their fate for such transgressions.
And on the day of the great judgment he shall be cast into the fire, and heal the earth which the angels have corrupted, and proclaim the healing of the earth, that they may heal the plague, and that all the children of men may not perish through all the secret things that the Watchers have disclosed and have taught their sons. And the whole earth has been corrupted through the works that were taught by Azazel.
After quoting the book demonstrating his intimate knowledge with the sacred texts, Ivan moved to his sermon.
The Book of Enoch tells us about the Watchers, angels sent from heaven to guard over humanity. Eventually, these Watchers fell into temptation and sinned. They had offspring with the daughters of men, the Nephilim. The books spill a lot of ink into those who are descended from a mortal woman, but we came from another group. The Watchers also practiced secret arts and magic. They used their heavenly knowledge to make experiments with the very nature of the beasts of this world. One of these experiments was to mix the blood of earthly creatures with their own angelic blood, creating monsters that populate the legends of men to this very day. They created hybrids, mortal beasts with heavenly origin. Our Nephilim receive just a single throwaway line on the books and are rapidly forgotten. It suits us. It keeps mortals oblivious to our nature and to our affairs. The miracle of our conception happened in old Babylon, where the first vampire emerged. The first one of our kind was the founder of House Drakul, Tiamat. She was a queen and student of the arts of Samyaza, the angel who taught sorcery to mankind. Through years of study, she realized that by using the sacred blood of the angels, she could not only live forever but acquire immense power from it. But the Watchers were sent to a hole underneath the desert, punished by God. The only angelical blood that remained on earth coursed through the veins of giants and eldritch beasts. The giants on those days were very rare, but the beasts terrorized the outskirts of Babylon ferociously. A dragon burned villages, a dire wolf stalked the plains, a giant sea serpent sank ships, among many others. Their legends live to this day in one shape or another. She led a cult of men and women to bring back the blood and heart of the dragon. Many thought it an impossible accomplishment, but they succeeded. In a ceremony at night, the queen ate the heart of the beast and requested to be exsanguinated, instructing her peers to pour the blood of the dragon in her mouth when she had no more human blood inside her, during a specific ritual she had developed. They agreed and followed her instructions, and when the angelic blood coursed through her body, she woke again, transformed. The merging of mortal and Nephilim into one came with unexpected results, for their spirits were cursed to hunger and thirst, but were not able to take food. We came from the blood, and blood was the only thing that could satiate our kind. That is why our appetite for it is boundless. Soon, the other members of the party repeated the process, because now they coveted something more precious than gold: immortality. The legend says as such: a queen and a dragon became the founder of House Drakul. A nobleman and a snake became the founder of House Basilisk. A hunter and a wolf became the founder of House Volkos. A wise man and a owl became the founder of House Ashk'Ari. A seductress and a eagle became the founder of House Strix. A criminal and a bat became the founder of House Orlok. A prophetess and a raven became the founder of House Morrigan. A magistrate and a spider became the founder of House Moroi. A diplomat and a black cat became the founder of House Pantera. A warrior and a sea serpent became the founder of House Leviathan. Each one of them was a mortal who managed to merge with one of the Nephilim. Soon they made Babylon into their domain and delivered the gift of Babylon to those who were worthy. Together, they created Nosferatu Utopia. Later, through trickery and deceit, another founder emerged. A Orlok and the Scorpion became the founder of House Sirkala, and he opposed all the other founders. Their struggle is the stuff of legends, and that age is considered our pinnacle by all of us. The golden age of the Nosferatu. The crowning achievement of these times was supposed to be the Tower of Babel. Its construction started under the auspices of our founders, but unfortunately it was never finished. Catastrophe struck Babylon and the tower was lost. Our entire kind was embroiled into dark, tumultuous events, and Nosferatu were spread far and wide to the corners of the earth. They mixed with distant mortal peoples and cultures, and our founders were lost to us. For 100 years after the fall of the Tower of Babel, chaos and destruction plagued our kind, and few of us managed to escape it. Nosferatu numbers dwindled, and after just a century there were very few left who had seen the days of Babel and the founders. If the Tower of Babel was not meant to be physically completed, our kind would at least achieve it in spirit. In 2091 BC, a huge gathering of Nosferatu first established an alliance and order which received its name in homage to Babylon. This is when the tower began. A gathering of single-minded Nosferatu with the intent to rebuild what was lost with the Tower of Babel, to keep alive the teachings of the founders. Each place the tower emerged, it followed a similar pattern. A hierophant or high priestess, who is responsible for our leadership and guidance, anoints a group of archons to embody the principles and virtues of old Babylon. These archons take over themselves the duties assigned to them and shepherd the other Nosferatu. The Sebastocrator serves as advisor to hierophants and archons, bringing to them specialized knowledge so they can better serve in their roles. The tower is defended by groups of warriors who train night after night for their sacred role. For 2,000 years, everywhere, the tower worked to bring back the ways of our founders even without their guidance. Each hierophant or high priestess poured over all the lore about Babylon that could be salvaged from the times of chaos. During this time, the tower started to resemble each of the cities and people around the old world. There were as many towers as there were cities where Nosferatu dwelt, but every one of them was united into a single objective. This was the way of our kind until the court emerged and started our struggle for the soul of Nosferatu existence. A struggle that continues to this very day and has crossed over the ocean to the New World. Here in Dreadford, a tower was formed during the 18th century by an alliance of Nosferatu with the intent to expel the newly formed court from the city and take over it. In the beginning, we had only 3 houses with us. 3 Nosferatu who made their way from the old world here to Dreadford, accompanied by their children. My sire Andrei Dulka from House Drakul, Nineveh from House Strix, and your sire Gaius the Lucius from House Basilisk. Not one of these original progenitors lived to this day, but as the struggle continued, new houses joined our cause. New Nosferatu came to our side and started their bloodlines. Beatrix van der Hoven from House Irkala, Hector from House Leviathan, Oppenheimer from House Morrigan, Obve from House Orlok, Elsa from a different bloodline of House Drakul, Farah from House Moroi, Luke from House Agnus, and our current High Priestess from House Ashk'Ari. As you can see now, we have more houses at our side than the wretched King's Court. We are on the cusp of ridding the city from their moral weakness and corruption. But we must not allow ourselves to grow arrogant and indolent, because yet still our victory lies at the other side of a hard-fought struggle. My purpose now, Antoinette, is to deliver from the fires of destruction as many of our kind as possible. There are those inside the King's Court who can listen to reason and be brought to our side.
I have heard some of this before, preacher.
Why don't you come to one of the sermons?
I'll think about it.
They were interrupted by a young woman who entered the chamber smiling with glee.
Ivan, you can't wait to hear what news I bring from the inner bowels of the King's Court. Oh, you are busy.
As if there is something you don't know, Akasha.
I will have to tend to the intelligence report now, my dear.
Antoinette got up and left.
I am delighted to report that the whole Volkos assignment is complete. On another note, there is this new Nosferatu.
She amused herself by pondering how a strong Nosferatu like Ivan allowed such beliefs on folklore to besmirch his pragmatism. Maybe it had some use to motivate those who lacked the proper impetus. However, it could lead to valuable personnel spending so much time wondering about a long-dead and forgotten age. She would always keep her focus where it mattered, at the present and at what is yet to come. Father Michael was reading in silence in his chambers when he was startled by a noise coming from another room inside the church. Before going to investigate, he put away a small envelope inside his pocket. The priest found none other than his child, Daniel Reed, searching for something among his own belongings. The detective noticed the priest approaching and stopped his activity for a split second before returning to it.
Have you decided to finally move in as I offered?
No. I feel safer in my room in the motel.
You have learned a lot. I am very proud of what you have accomplished so far, my son. Nevertheless, you should listen to reason when I tell you are in a more vulnerable position out there.
Daniel did not respond.
Can you tell me at least what you are doing here?
I'm looking for some notes I might have left in here. Nosferatu politics and relationships are exhausting, and more than a little complicated.
I have taught you all about hunting and feeding and about our laws and how to keep yourself from being destroyed. But I have not told you anything about our origin and the history of the King's Court.
I don't have time for this. I am in the middle of something.
Isn't information vital to your trade? Do you think anyone else would be willing to share such knowledge with you at no cost? Maybe understanding the whole picture of the court will help you make sense of our politics, my son.
Daniel deliberated silently for a while.
Okay, I am all ears, just please. Don't start lecturing me on how to be a monster.
He said, sitting down facing his sire.
You probably have already met or at least heard about the tower. They are the old ways. They have existed since the dawn of Nosferatu history, and stipulated a lot of mythology to our origins. They believe in some grand scheme to the Nosferatu curse, and for millennia, they have behaved like a blood cult. To oppose the tower was to be alone and hunted. Our kind was stuck in a quagmire of contradictions, dark magic, and demonic worship. They were spread as far as our cursed blood could reach. But the age of the tower eventually would come to an end. The legend tells of a new House of the Blood, House Agnes, which emerged during the time of the Messiah. A Nosferatu from House Drakul was miraculously transformed by his blood and became the founder of this new house. How this happened exactly varies from one version to another. This new founder was exempt from several aspects of our curse. It is said that he worked miracles and terrified the elder Nosferatu of his time by the unique state of his condition. When the Agnes founder brought new people into the blood and they shared his powers, it was considered heresy to the old ways. Nonetheless, many eager to escape the curse went into pilgrimage to meet and be made like him. Unfortunately, he was incapable of doing so. Embroiled in superstition and myth, those who were desperate started to sacrifice holy men and women, using their blood to try and replicate the miracle that gave birth to House Agnes. Those were dark times for people of faith. The tower was appalled by these events. Fearing to lose their grip onto power, they hunted this new family with all their might and hate, pouring their resources and intelligence into finding a way to eliminate the rift in Nosferatu society created by House Agnes. Like a Greek tragedy, the more blood they spilled in this cause, the more Nosferatu realized the error of the old ways. What followed was inescapable. One night, Carolus, a young man who was said to be virtuous above the many, was brought into the blood of House Agnes by its founder, and he decided to fight back to protect his brothers and sisters, but above all else, to forge a different path for our kind. Carolus spoke of the importance of clinging to our mortal soul and rejecting the monster inside each of us. Moreover, he went on to take up arms and slowly bring order to a troubled landscape. This Nosferatu managed to assemble others from each house, and they joined him in his battle. The tower fought back fiercely, but this was the first time it could not put down the rebellion against its bloody ways. The tower raised dark knights, sorcerers, and monsters and sent them against the rebels, but each of them failed. They persecuted Carolus and his entourage everywhere. But through bravery and great personal sacrifices, the rebels won victories and gained ground. New supporters joined them night after night as stories about miracles and the virtue of the rebels spread. They accused the tower in their beliefs of being an excuse for indulging the worst vices of Nosferatu nature and practicing devil worship. The rebels crowned their leader, Carolus, a king, and he organized his associates into a round table where each knight represented one of the houses. A folk hero was chosen as Paladin of House Leviathan. A liberator was chosen as Paladin of House Strix. A magician was chosen as Paladin of House Drakul. A duelist was chosen as Paladin of House Ashk'Ari. A midwife was chosen as Paladin of House Basilisk. A reformed criminal was chosen as Paladin of House Panthera. A wanderer was chosen as Paladin of House Morrigan. A priest was chosen as Paladin of the House Irkala. A sailor was chosen as Paladin of House Orlok. A sower was chosen as Paladin of House Volkos. A healer was chosen as Paladin of House Moroi. A king was chosen as Paladin of House Agnes. In the year 500 AD, there was a terrible battle. At one side, the tower was led by their high priestess, a vicious sorceress, and her most trusted archon as her Black Knight. While at the other, Carolus led his round table. The rebels won, and the tower was reduced to a mere shadow of its former self. This was known henceforth as the Second Fall. The early Middle Ages had given birth to a new path for our kind, the King's Court. It set in place rules and morals to set us apart from monsters. The King's Court hinged on the idea of valuing whatever shreds we still had from our human existence before the long night. We would stay close to anything that could help us to resist our Nephilim as hard as we could. The court banished the nightmares of old and powerful Nosferatu from ages past were destroyed. Those who survived were the ones who hid, resigning themselves to sleep. The victors of the battle against the tower went into anonymity, ready to intervene should its threat once again become dire. The Round Table worked behind the scenes to help the court spread everywhere. Soon, almost all Nosferatu had forgotten about Babylon and the old ways, and were more worried about their mortal soul fiefdom and liege. The general structure was more or less the same we have today. The king would rule as a protector of the customs and laws, together with a council that would ensure the rest of the Nosferatu had representation and participation into the process of rulership. The great nobles are the dukes which have a vote in the king's council. The lesser nobles are the counts and barons which receive small domains to protect and manage. One special case is the marquise, which usually receives a diplomatic or strategic role, be it either dealing with the other supernatural creatures which share this world with mortals and Nosferatu, or keeping the political stability and peace inside the king's court. The king nominates a paladin or shire reaver to be responsible for enforcing his decrees and laws. Here in Dreadford, we go with shire reaver. You may have heard of Bartholomew. The reaver is assisted into his duties by the horseman. I am myself a count, and the second in line of our faction in House Strix. The only one ahead of me is Dupont, who is a duke. It all was set up to work like a charm, but deterioration seems to be inescapable. Everything that Nosferatu dare to touch rots. There are whispers about the Round Table no longer being united, or maybe even existing at all. The tower was rebuilt mysteriously. Some say that it represents inevitable facets of our existence, and that it will return as long as our kind remains. Others ascribe its return to direct influence from other worldly masters. But the theory I like the most is the Round Table split, and one or more of its knights turned against it, betrayed the rest, and are responsible for the old enemy's rebirth.
What happened to the first king?
Who knows if he ever existed, my son? Maybe there was a noble, virtuous king who assembled a group of knights to fight the tower. Or maybe this legend was created to serve as a self-aggrandizing tool for lords and ladies drunk with power.
You really don't like admitting you don't know something, don't you, Michael? What about House Agnes? I have never heard about it. Do we have any of them here in this city?
What do you think, my son? As if something holy would have anything to do with our kind in this wretched city.
If all these stories are just ancient myths and fairy tales, how did the court start here in Dreadford?
The King's Court of Dreadford was started by a group of Nosferatu who arrived with their brood during the 18th century. Abrantes from House Volkos, Francis Stephen from House Drakul, Justine de la Chapelle from House Strix, Maastricht from House Orlok, Adelaide from House Morrigan, the Hermit from House Leviathan, Lodewijk van der Hoeven from House Irkala, and the Betrayer from House Ashk'Ari, whose name was erased from history.
I've never heard these names. Wait a minute, you said one of them was called the Betrayer. I think the Shire Reaver was saying something like that to Van Arden.
They formed the previous council, the first council this city ever had. Each of them served as duke, with one of them, the Betrayer, ruling as king, thanks to him being the most powerful among them. Within a few decades, they succeeded in putting together a fairly powerful king's court. Soon after, the tower arrived and challenged them for control of the city. The contest between the king's court and the tower was brutal, but the king's court was able to repel the tower and kept most of Dreadford to itself. This assured a century of prosperity and peace, during which we flourished, as did the city and the mortals who lived here. Unfortunately, in the last decade of the 19th century, the unthinkable happened. The king himself allied with the tower, and in an act of betrayal, they descended upon the court like vultures. During a single night, the king murdered each of the dukes while the tower invaded the city. Only one member of the council survived that fateful night: Francis Stephen of House Drakul, our current king. He led the counterattack, and in the struggles that followed, managed to defeat and kill the Betrayer, while the leaders of the tower fled in retreat. Francis Stephen was crowned as Your Serene Highness. He nominated a duke for the council from each house among the Nosferatu, who most valiantly fought for our victory. The house of the Betrayer was purged, and our present Ashk'Aris are from another bloodline. They have nothing to do with the Betrayer, but are still targeted with a lot of suspicion. House Irkala and all its members disappeared during the tumultuous nights of the Great Betrayal. One house was found guilty of having colluded with the Betrayer, House Morrigan, which was sentenced with royal censure and had its members punished for their crimes. Not many of them are left nowadays. As soon as all this was over and the new king's council was established, the new king retired into a secluded and discreet lifestyle. He rules the city through the council to this very day.
So you were saying Dupont is some kind of war hero? I would never have guessed it.
The same as each of the sitting dukes of the council. They are children from the first Nosferatu of their house to arrive here, sons and daughter of the original council of Dreadford, regrettably lost during the Great Betrayal. Well, apart from Van Arden. As I said, he and his brood, which arrived at a later time to the city. They helped the hunt for the remaining members from the previous House Ashk'Ari until none were left. After that, he petitioned the council to join it as Duke, and it was decided to grant him his request.
And why would a king do that? Why would he turn against his own court?
They say he was driven to madness by the dogma of the Tower, but not much is known about him anymore. His name and history were excluded from the official records as punishment for his crimes.
Michael, where were you during all this?
Well, I think that is enough history for tonight, my son. I am tired and the sun is coming up any minute now. Rest well. I hope you have good luck with your current endeavor.
The priest retired to his quarters, leaving Daniel to his suspicions alone. He had a lot to chew on now. Daniel returned to his search for his notebook and found it.
I have no intention to count on luck.
Oliver was at his sire's manor, a secluded, resort-like private residence nestled among lush greenery. The atmosphere was serene, with the sounds of nature in the background. He stood in the grand study, looking out the window, lost in thought, as Nicholas entered the room.
What we discuss here should remain between us, Oliver.
Nicholas closed the door behind him.
Of course, Nick. What's on your mind?
I want to offer you an opportunity to go to a place where you can learn to practice the arcane arts. The Scholomance.
Arcane arts? What are you talking about?
Magic. I've kept my abilities hidden, but as my child and business partner, I see no reason to keep you in the dark any longer.
I never imagined. Why now?
I usually prefer to keep my cards close to my chest, Oliver, but now there is an opportunity. The Scholomance is an ancient school of magic in Transylvania. Only 10 students are enrolled at a time for a period of 7 years. I can secure you one of the spots that are about to open.
I don't know. I am not so sure I should leave the city right now.
I believe I can help you make up your mind. Let me share some hidden knowledge of our house. Holloway no longer teaches any of this, and it's rare for anyone to know anything about it nowadays. Some tidbits I learned from my sire, some are from my time at the school.
Oliver's curiosity was piqued.
All right, I'm listening.
Nicholas settled into a chair and motioned for Oliver to sit as well.
Our lineage, House Drakul, has roots that intertwine deeply with the Scholomance. It was founded centuries ago by a group of powerful Nosferatu from our house. But let's rewind back to the beginning, to the saga of Tiamat, the first vampire, and her quest for vengeance. Through us, her bloodline echoes to this day, as a warning against the darkness that lies within us all.
So far into the past? I thought you were going to sell me on the Scholomance.
We'll get there, don't worry. It all started in an ancient realm of Sumeria, where magic and mysticism intertwined with the forces of creation and chaos. There lived Apsu, a powerful mage, and his wife Tiamat, a sorceress of unrivaled beauty and strength. Together they ruled over the primordial waters, guardians of the cosmic balance. Apsu, with his mastery of the arcane arts, delved into the deepest mysteries of the universe, seeking to unlock the secrets of immortality and divine power. His ambition knew no bounds, and he hungered for knowledge that would elevate him above the mortal realm. But as Apsu delved deeper into the forbidden realms of magic, whispers of darkness crept into his heart. He plotted to claim dominion over his kind. Mortal mages were the unrivaled masters of the supernatural world at the time, and they were growing in power. Some were having designs on godhood itself and domain over the cosmos. Unbeknownst to Apsu, Tiamat, his beloved wife and partner, sensed the darkness growing within him. She pleaded with him to abandon his schemes and embrace the path of wisdom and enlightenment. But Apsu, consumed by his lust for power, refused to heed her warnings. In the depths of their palace beneath the waters, Apsu conspired with his fellow mages, plotting their conquest and destruction of those who resisted. But their plans were thwarted by Ea, their own son and a powerful mage in his own right. In a daring act of betrayal, Ea and his allies struck down Apsu in his sleep, ending his reign of tyranny before it could begin. Upon discovering her husband's fate, Tiamat was consumed by rage. Her heart shattered and her mind fractured as she beheld the lifeless form of her beloved Apsu. In her despair, she vowed vengeance upon those who had betrayed them, swearing to unleash chaos and destruction upon the guilty. Driven by grief and madness, Tiamat embarked on a quest to unlock the ultimate power of the forbidden arts, the gift of immortality. Forsaking her humanity and embracing darkness, she transformed into something else, the first of the Nosferatu. With newfound power coursing through her veins, she emerged from the shadows, her eyes burning with a hunger for vengeance. Apsu was considered the god of fresh water by mortals, the ether, the mana, the waters above. But Tiamat became the goddess of salt water, the blood within. When Tiamat returned to the world she left behind, her heart filled with fury. She devoured any who dared to stand in her way, and she was not alone. She had 10 founders of the other houses at her side, and together, they gorged themselves in the blood of mortal mages who were not smart enough to flee and hide. They started the reign of the Nosferatu. Each founder brought their chosen ones into the blood. Kings and queens were taken as familiars. For a time, vampires ruled unopposed over humanity, for the houses were at peace with one another, and no other creature dared to challenge their supremacy over the night. At that time, our house was known by the name of its founder, House Tiamat. Of course, this would not last forever. There would come a time when intrigue and strife divided the houses, and Nosferatu was set against Nosferatu. To make matters worse, the mages returned, led by a new and powerful champion, Marduk. From this moment on, mages and Nosferatu were at a relentless shadow war throughout the ages, taking turns at the top and bottom in a vicious cycle of violence. The specifics are very obscure. Not much knowledge from this age remains after the fall of the Tower of Babel and the disappearance of the founders.
If this knowledge is lost, how can you know it?
What is known is what was passed down by the handful of Nosferatu from each house that endured through the fall. The Babelites, as our kind calls them. Children of the founders who were walking in this age and survived into the next. All Nosferatu descend from one of these Babelites. They are the starters of the bloodlines inside each of the houses of the blood. They are the bridge between the legend of the founders and recorded Nosferatu history. There are 4 known Drakul Babelites: the Hydra, who is Tiamat's first child, a master of the demonic form and infamous for being the first Nosferatu to lose himself to the dragon and go mad. The Warden, who protected the domains of the house and learned from Tiamat to command power over their territory itself. The Wyvern Rider, who was the knight she sent against her enemies and was a master of imposing the demonic form over beasts and others. And finally, the Storm Dragon, who was the regent of their mother and performed the royal duties of the house. According to the genealogy our house keeps stored here in Dreadford, we are descendants from the Warden.
This is all so fascinating. I have never heard about a war between Nosferatu and mages. Is this still going on?
The war between mages and Nosferatu lasted for thousands of years, Oliver. But eventually, after the appearance of House Agnes, the mages noticed that the old ways were no longer being followed by Nosferatu. They saw an opening and sent an envoy, Mirrodin, or as people commonly call him nowadays, Merlin.
Merlin? The legendary wizard? What did he have to do with our house?
Mirrodin was instrumental in ending the war. He helped the Round Table be brought together, and with diplomacy, managed to broker peace between mages and Nosferatu. He and Carolus put an end to the conflict that started in ancient times. Mirrodin took an apprentice in the Round Table, the Paladin of House Drakul. The identity of this paladin is shrouded in mystery since the Round Table retreated into anonymity. But what we do know is that he, along with other students of Mirrodin, founded the Scholomance to preserve and pass on the secrets they learned from their distinguished teacher. Now it gets even more fascinating. The only child of the Paladin of House Drakul was a Nosferatu named Percival.
Percival? I heard that name before.
He was a knight, Oliver. It is told he is among the most noble and honorable of our kind, if a bit naive. He embarked on a quest for Carolus to find the Holy Grail.
And did he succeed?
There is much controversy around this subject. Percival had a journey fraught with dangers. Many knights perished in this quest. But with the last of his strength, Percival brought a squire, Francis Stephen, into the blood and entrusted what he found to him so he could return it to safety.
Oliver's eyes widened in realization.
Francis Stephen, our king.
Yes, Oliver. Francis Stephen, the progenitor of House Drakul in the King's Court of Dreadford. Of course, when he arrived here in the city, and the court was started, he was just a duke. The king at the time was the betrayer. But he was a champion to the King's Court during the Great Betrayal and defeated the Tower and the former king, earning the crown. Here in Dreadford, the genealogy is much clearer. Francis Stephen had 3 children, Drusilla, Holloway, and my sire, Elsa.
Nick, you said that he was brought into the blood by Percival, an honorable knight. Why does the king condone Holloway's more questionable actions? Or those of the council as well?
It's hard to say, Oliver. Maybe he was never honorable to begin with. Remember that Percival was considered naive. Or maybe the weight of the betrayal was too much to bear and he fell to the dragon. This also could answer why he is retired and the city is ruled by the council.
What do you really think is the truth, Nick?
Nicholas hesitated. He looked around instinctively despite being inside his own home.
I don't like sharing my opinions about it, but I am going to confide something to you. He and I had a distant relationship as he was my grandsire, but Elsa told me about him. And from what I gathered, Francis Stephen was a virtuous man, and Percival wasn't as naive as some thought him to be. For who he is right now, I really can't tell what would make such a big change take place other than the Nephilim. This would also explain why Holloway is so wary of members of House Drakul falling to the dragon.
You said we are descendants from the paladin of House Drakul from the Round Table. So our bloodline has a direct connection to the founders of the Scholomance?
Yes, you're right. I was worried that the legacy of magic arts was fading from our bloodline. Percival, Francis Stephen, and my sire were not mages, so I decided to enroll at the Scholomance, the school our ancestor created. I put into my mind the resolve to become a master at the arts taught there. And now, I'm offering the same to you, Oliver.
Oliver had a thoughtful expression on his face.
Before we delve further into this, there's something that's been on my mind.
Nicholas raised an eyebrow.
What is it, Oliver?
You mentioned earlier that our house was once known as House Tiamat. Why did it change?
Nicholas furrowed his brow. Oliver was evading the question of going to the Scholomance.
Our house has different names in different places.
But why the change from Tiamat to Dracul?
It was a tumultuous time, Oliver. Our house, the House of the Dragon, had fallen from power over Nosferatu society. The glorious past seemed like a distant memory, even for the eldest of our kind. House Agnes had ruled over the Round Table, and since then less and less courts were under a king or queen of our house. At the Tower, House Basilisk had usurped the position of leading house. The House of the Dragon and the House of the Snake had a long-standing feud. It is said that Tiamat reserved for her house the right to rule over Nosferatu and granted to House Basilisk the right to rule over mortals. But as soon as the age of the founders had ended, both houses disrespected this agreement and started to compete with one another for the leadership of both vampire and mortal worlds. At times, this was restricted to conspiring and backstabbing. At others, it escalated into an all-out war of Nosferatu from both houses and their allies and servants. That's when an ancient vampire from our house sought to reverse our decline and reclaim the position of ruling house among the Nosferatu, to the House of the Dragon. He is popularly known as Dracula. His origins are lost to the mists of time. When he became famous, he had lived for centuries.
Dracula. I've heard of him. But how did he achieve such a feat?
Through cunning and manipulation, combined with a fair share of brutality. Dracula planted the seeds for the creation of a chivalric order, the Order of the Dragon. It served as the perfect cover for his vampiric activities. After covering his bases, he assumed the persona of Vlad II. This allowed him to formally join the order and gain legitimacy within its ranks. Later, as Vlad III, also known to history as Vlad the Impaler, he further solidified his influence, instilling fear across the land. This order allowed him to recruit noblemen and warriors. By day, the order engaged in traditional chivalrous activities to avoid mortal suspicion. But by night, it waged war against the rivals of Dracula, the Tower and House Basilisk being the primary target, but not the only ones. Dracula had produced powerful children of his own and was planning to turn influential figures across Europe and the Near East into vampires and familiars. He managed to carve a kingdom for himself and fought to protect and expand it viciously. It is said that he had a personal thirst for mystic knowledge and ancient relics, so he made sure to annex the territory where the Scholomance was located, and he even attended it for the full 7 years.
What about the king's court? Did they support him?
The relationship between Dracula and the court was always tumultuous. He was more or less allied with it, but he also opposed most of the courts that shared borders with his domain. His brutality and endless ambition earned him enemies among several councils. However, his efforts were not in vain. He built a mighty kingdom, bringing power and authority back to the House of the Dragon. He was, and still is, the only vampire to crown himself king of mortals and Nosferatu alike. As the reign of the founders had not lasted forever, neither did Dracula's. In addition to being relentlessly opposed by the Tower, he had attracted some notoriety between vampire hunters. His forces had been plagued by their activities for a while, but then Michael the Brave entered the stage. A prince of Wallachia who uncovered evidence of vampires and of their hidden master, Dracula, manipulating events from the shadows. With the help of a secret group of vampire hunters, the Order of St. George, also known as the Dragon Slayers, Michael the Brave confronted Dracula in a contest of armies and wits. At the Battle of Mirislow, they met in the battlefield and fought a bloody duel. The war with Michael the Brave and the hunters served Dracula a dangerous defeat, not at the hands of Nosferatu, but of mortals. Michael barely escaped their encounter, but for Dracula and his kingdom, this marked the end. Sensing weakness, his vampiric rivals redoubled their efforts. He lost the support of some of his children, and he was betrayed by his closest family members. In a last effort, Dracula sought support of the king's courts all around Europe, but they were averse to the idea of rescuing him. They knew he was on the brink of becoming emperor, a position not held, in more than name alone, since Rome. They offered him enough help to ensure he retired to his castle, now a mere count. Michael the Brave was murdered soon after. He had unwittingly served many Nosferatu's interests, but even Dracula's enemies would not allow a mortal who knew as much as him and who had achieved victory against a powerful vampire to go unpunished. This is when the House of the Dragon took on the name of House Drakul. In the king's court, Dracula's methods were not that well regarded, but the name of the founder had been a thorny subject for a long time. The court had always worked to leave behind the stories of Babylon and welcome the change.
But why does the Tower use the name if Dracula was their enemy?
Because many of their great Drakul are Dracula's descendants who switched sides during the war. They wear the name with pride. One of Dracula's children, Andrei Dulka, a fearsome warrior and master of the demonic form, traveled to this city and started the bloodline of House Drakul, which is part of the Tower in Dreadford.
Wait a second. You are telling me we have descendants of Dracula's blood in Dreadford?
Unfortunately, yes. Dulka had several children, including Ivan, and most if not all Draculs from the Tower are his direct blood descendants. Well, in the king's court, the same could be said about Percival.
What about Dracula? Is he still around?
He was secluded to his castle and the surrounding villages for some centuries. Around the end of the 19th century, he suddenly left on a voyage to London. He has been missing ever since. But now, Oliver, what is your answer to my offer? I believe attending the Scholomance could open up new opportunities for you. What do you say?
Oliver hesitated as he carefully chose his words.
I appreciate your offer, Nick. I really do. But I just can't leave Dreadford right now.
Nicholas looked disappointed.
Oliver, you need to think about the bigger picture. The Scholomance could provide you with valuable knowledge and skills that could benefit you in the long run.
I understand. But my place is here in Dreadford. There is too much going on. Too many unanswered questions.
Well, partner, you don't have to give your definitive answer now. The offer still stands if you change your mind.
And what are your thoughts on the rebellion against the King's Council? Yelena told me you were keeping me in the dark about something.
That's a complicated matter. I believe in the cause, but I have reservations about her methods.
Why's that?
Yelena is reckless, and that is fertile ground for danger. It is my firm conviction that she is putting many at risk with her impulsive actions. Nosferatu that can make a difference, but may be destroyed in collateral damage. You saw firsthand what happened to Amanda. Do you think she is better now than before?
The council is corrupt, Nicholas. I saw it with my own eyes. Something needs to be done.
One of your crewmates was shot with an arrow before he had the time to explain himself at Yelena's request. Her last stunt almost set the city on fire. I agree, something needs to be done. but it must be done carefully. It needs to be strategic, designed, and architected. Rushing into things could make matters worse. The Council could crush anyone who plays their cards wrong, and the tower is waiting just outside.
Is this why you want me away from the city?
Nicholas was caught by surprise and sighed.
Yes, I wanted to protect you from the potential dangers. I brought you into the blood such a short time ago.
Well, I appreciate your concern, Nick. But instead of hiding away, I want to help take back our city from this corrupt council.
Oliver.
I'm staying, Nick, and I'm joining the rebellion. I stood by the council at the library because I agree a battle would have made matters worse at that time, but either you bring me to the fold or I will be forced to oblige Yelena. This city needs to change, and I will be part of the solution one way or another.
Very well, Oliver. I'll take steps to introduce you to the others.
Thank you, Nick. I won't let you down.
I know you won't. Now go and stay safe.
As he left the house of his sire, Oliver touched the business card in his pocket. Maybe he should have told Nicholas about it. He took it in his hands and looked at the phone number written behind it.
What should I do?
His mind raced with questions and doubt as he walked through the dimly lit exterior of the mansion. No, Nicholas has enough on his plate as it is. Oliver made a decision then and there to uncover the truth on his own, without dragging his sire into the midst of his personal turmoil.
I'll figure it out. I have to.
Tom opened the cabin door. Standing outside were two imposing figures, the White Ronin with his piercing eyes and calm demeanor, and the Goblin, which Tom could bet had a sly grin playing on his lips, even if it was impossible to see through the mask he wore. The moonlight filtered through the trees, casting eerie shadows on their faces.
Come in.
He stepped aside and motioned them inside. The cabin was cozy with a warm glow being cast over the rustic furnishings. As they entered, Tom couldn't contain his curiosity.
I appreciate you coming here. I need to know more about my sire, the lone ghoul.
The two Orloks exchanged a glance before they burst out laughing. Tom felt a pang of confusion and embarrassment.
The lone ghoul? Oh, he was a huge bastard, that one.
I thought he was a hero. He was so highly regarded in the Parliament. I don't understand.
We don't know who your sire is, Tom. The lone ghoul did have the right to blood, but he never used it before he fell in combat with the tower. It just didn't sit well with me that, after all you did, Vector and Spectre were trying to destroy you. So, I intervened.
The Goblin snorted and crossed his arms.
The lone ghoul was Spectre's bootlicker. No surprise the Parliament loved him.
Tom felt a mix of frustration and gratitude. He managed a polite nod.
Thanks both of you for standing up for me during the trial. I owe you one.
The White Ronin observed him closely.
Don't be disappointed. Sometimes it's better not to have a sire, trust me. If you knew mine...
It's okay, you saw a problem and came up with a solution. I am just puzzled.
The Goblin interrupted, leaning forward with a mischievous glint in his eye.
Hey, enough about family drama. How about joining the ranks of the best? I heard what ye did to the Leviathan from the tower. You're a smart fella. If you're ever interested, I can get you some good work.
Thanks for the offer, but I've got some unfinished business with my crew.
Tell me, considering you don't have a sire, you never learned much about our house, did you?
I heard a little about House Orlok from my companions, but that's all.
The White Ronin considered for a moment, then nodded.
I can tell you a little if you wish.
I would like that. Someday I'll repay you both for your help. Quid pro quo.
Both the White Ronin and the Goblin chuckled.
Where to begin?
The beginning, of course.
Fair enough.
Tom took a seat, ready to listen to the knowledge that would be shared with him.
The House of the Bat traces its lineage back to the time of the founder in ancient Sumeria. Our story begins in the shadows. The first Nosferatu from House Orlok wasn't just any thief. He was a master at his trade, a legend. He didn't steal petty trinkets. He stole relics and forbidden knowledge from the powerful mages who ruled the land. Imagine the audacity. A mere mortal making fools of those who wielded arcane power beyond comprehension.
Wait, mages like wizards and witches really exist?
The world is a much more fucked up place than you imagine it to be. There are more things in heaven and earth than are dreamt of in your philosophy.
The White Ronin chuckled.
This thief's name was Akimu. His exact origin is a mystery even to the oldest and wisest of House Orlok. What is known is that he got famous because he was the only one who could steal from the mages, bypassing their wards, security, gates, and walls. He rose from being a nobody to proeminence thanks to his deeds.
How could a thief steal from mages and evade their defenses so easily?
There are many versions of the legend. The one I heard tells that he had the patronage of a warlock who taught him how to exploit the vulnerabilities of the mages in exchange for Akimu stealing from his opponents and bringing back their wealth and secrets for them to share. However, one day Akimu got a little too daring. He tried to steal from the king of the mages, or whatever they called their leader. He was finally caught. The mages relished the opportunity to take revenge for their wounded hubris against the normal human who made a fool of them. Akimu was tortured, had his hand cut off, and after the mages were finished, they buried him barely alive.
They buried him alive? That's brutal.
No kidding. After the mages had left him to rot under the earth, he was visited by Tiamat, the first Nosferatu. She removed him from his grave, gave him a little of his strength back, and using her powers, granted him a monstrous new hand. She said it would last him for some days and that she wanted him to do a job for her, something he was very good at. Steal something from the mages. He told her that he had been caught, and there was not any reason for him to do anything because as soon as the strength she gave him vanished, he would surely die. Tiamat answered that he could return to his hole in the ground if he so wished. But if he wanted revenge, he should use the strength she had granted him and go to the desert to hunt for a Nephilim, the bat. So he went into the desert, and sometime after he returned as the founder of House Orlok, or House Akimu as it was known then. Because he was left to rot with necrotic wounds, when he was brought to the blood, he acquired a cadaveric visage that spread plagues and diseases among the living. He was sent to spy on the mages and stole from them the very relic that kept them safe. With the other founders, he feasted on their blood. When the mages saw him return as a monster after having buried him, it gave birth to the legend of the dead that were improperly buried, returning to devour the living. These hungry dead were known as Ikimu, children of our founder, members of our house. He disappeared, as did the other founders during the Tower of Babel. Many legends surround him. Some say he stole from the Fae, others that he stole from Tiamat and the other founders, and was branded a criminal even among Nosferatu. After he vanished, what remained of our house, the House of the Bat, were just some of his children.
Fae? Like fairies?
Fairies, ogres, elves, and whatnot.
So they exist too?
What did I just tell you?
There are more things between heaven and earth, blah 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 blah.
They all shared a laugh.
He's a quick learner.
Do we have them in Dreadford?
Some trolls under bridges and a couple of Bigfoots. Nothing to worry about.
Well, except for the
White Ronin and the Goblin exchanged a glance.
What?
nothing. That's a story for another time.
We went off on a tangent. Let's get back to Akimu's children. The devourer, who is said to be the most terrifying of the house for his appetite for the living, was insatiable. The grave robber, known to be especially vindictive and stealing from anyone who slighted him after provoking their demise. The revenant, so deformed his visage was impossible to behold without losing your sanity. He also developed control over the diseases he spread. And the prospector, the greediest among the house, who started digging and building in search of riches. If the Nosferatu who told me the legend is to be believed, in Dreadford, we are descended from the prospector.
So we're descended from a greedy vampire who dug for riches?
The White Ronin chuckled.
Exactly. Not quite the noble lineage you were hoping for, eh?
It is certainly an intriguing story, if nothing else.
I still want to know about the Mongolian horde Orloks. I want to find someone reliable to tell me their story.
He could have bought the story from that peddler.
The price he was asking for was a ripoff, and I'm not sure he wouldn't make it all up on the spot.
Aren't ye forgetting something? You were telling Tom the tale of our house and was approaching me favorite part.
The White Ronin turned to Tom.
You still with me, kid?
Tom nodded eagerly.
I am. I want to hear more.
Well, for centuries, the House of the Bat prided itself on adaptability. Many of the other houses branded us as greedy criminals and untrustworthy, but we thrived in the shadows, making alliances and connections that served our interests. This is best exemplified by the next Nosferatu I want to tell you about, the one who gives our house its name. A Nosferatu so well regarded for his influence and resourcefulness that we bear his name to this day, Count Orlok.
Ooh, this is the juicy part.
2 brothers were born into nobility during the first millennium. The elder was destined to become the legendary Dracula, while the younger would carve a legacy of his own through cunning and treachery. They were inseparable during their youth, bound by kinship and shared dreams of power. But as they grew older, their paths began to diverge. The elder, with his charisma and martial prowess, attracted the attention of the House of the Dragon. They saw in him a potential leader, one who could command respect and fear. And so, one fateful night, he was brought into the blood, his mortality stripped away, leaving the younger brother behind as a mere mortal.
So the younger brother was the lucky one?
The younger brother's heart burned with jealousy and resentment. He watched as his brother embraced his new vampiric nature and rose to prominence. Feeling abandoned and overshadowed, he sought a way to elevate himself to similar heights. He assumed the name Orlok and turned to the arts of manipulation and subterfuge, gaining influence over the trade guilds and crime networks of his time. His cunning and resourcefulness made him a powerful figure in the shadows. It was during this time of bitter envy that he was approached by House Basilisk, ancient enemies of the House of the Dragon. The Basilisks saw an opportunity in Orlok's ambition and offered him a tantalizing promise. They would turn him into a vampire, giving him the immortality and power he craved. In return, he would help them bring down Dracula.
Did he agree?
Of course he did. His heart filled with dark anticipation. With his newfound alliances and resources, he began a clandestine campaign against his brother. He financed Dracula's enemies and manipulated potential allies into refusing their support. Orlok's machinations were subtle and pervasive, sowing discord and weakening Dracula's power base. This is something House Drakul will never admit to, but we know it to be true.
And then the twist.
Yes, the twist. The Basilisks fulfilled their promise to Orlok, but not as he had hoped. Instead of turning him into one of their own, they transformed him into a member of a monstrous and twisted lineage of vampires, House Ikimu. Orlok's form became grotesque, reflecting his inner darkness and ambition. The Basilisks had kept their word, but ensured that Orlok would never be one of them.
That's cruel.
Undeterred by his monstrous appearance, Orlok continued his campaign against Dracula as a shadowy figure, a puppet master pulling the strings of conflict and betrayal. Dracula, now a powerful vampire king, found his realm facing many problems, unable to pinpoint the source of his misfortune. As Dracula's reign weakened, Orlok's influence grew. He manipulated events from behind the scenes, ensuring that Dracula's enemies remained well-funded and well-coordinated. The once mighty vampire king was besieged on all sides, his former allies turning their backs on him in favor of Orlok's lucrative offers. Finally, Dracula's empire collapsed, and he was forced to flee into the night, his power shattered. Orlok emerged from the shadows to claim most of his brother's former territory. His monstrous appearance became a symbol of his ruthless ambition and cunning. He reveled in his victory, knowing he had outwitted and outlasted his brother.
And that's how House Orlok got its name.
Orlok's tale became a dark legend within our house, inspiring many. It is a testament to the power of envy and the lengths to which one man would go to achieve his desires. And though he had gained everything he wanted, Orlok remained haunted by the twisted irony of his fate, forever a monster both in body and soul.
Does he still walk among us?
He was last seen in the early 19th century, when he left the Carpathian Mountains to the city of Wisborg, in Germany. Some say he fell in love with a young woman, and that love caused his demise. Some say these are tall tales, but no one has seen him after this.
Love can make even the darkest hearts change, right?
You don't say.
One of Orlok's children was the overseer of the guilds and criminal networks in the Low Countries. This child brought into the blood a man called Maastricht, the progenitor of House Orlok in Dreadford. Maastricht was a wily old bastard, and when the king's court was founded in this city, he worked overtime to create the network our house uses to this day. They say he liked to tell the tale of Orlok to circles of newly transformed Nosferatu. Maastricht sired several children, one of whom is Spectre, our Speaker of the Parliament who so politely tried to have you killed, and who represents us at the King's Council.
You know, the Moody Banshee told the story better.
Is that so?
Oh, absolutely. She adds all these dramatic pauses and spooky sound effects. It's quite the performance.
Well, why don't you go to her and ask her to tell the story?
I can't do that.
Why not?
Because she would shoot me on the spot. She's not exactly known for her patience, especially when it comes to me.
Ah, I see. Well, perhaps for now we should stick to my rendition of the tale.
Sounds like a plan.
Guys, sorry to butt in, but I've been meaning to ask about something. Remember that false bomb Spectre had the Midnight Fiends plan in the sewers? What was that all about? I have a theory, but I wanted to hear what you guys think.
Spectre doesn't reveal his plans to anyone, but you can have a good guess at his motives. The detective was working for DuPont, earning him favors from a lot of important Nosferatu of all houses. He probably wanted to clip the Frenchman's wings and neutralize his new advantage. Thus, he sent the Midnight Fiends into the sewers with a fake bomb, hoping the monsters would deal with your crew.
Nosferatu society is ruthless, huh? But there was something else I was meaning to ask.
Go ahead.
Why did you not destroy me when you had the chance? What changed your mind?
The White Ronin and the Goblin exchanged glances, and the latter shrugged.
Well, I was a family man once like yourself, but that's another story for another time.
Silence hung heavy for a moment.
What about another story?
Well, we have time for one last story. There's one more legendary Nosferatu from our house with ties to Dreadford, Davy Jones. He visited the city several times, but it's the Goblin here who knows the story better.
Ah, Davy Jones. Now there's a tale worth hearing. He was an eerie figure who was talked about in hushed tones by sailors. So enigmatic, his very presence seems shrouded in mystery. Mortals consider him a seafaring superstition, a supernatural guardian of the sea. They believe that when a ship sank and its crew perished, their souls would be claimed by Davy Jones and taken to his locker at the bottom of the ocean. But the truth is, he's a character straight out of the darkest depths of Nosferatu lore. He is a member of our house, the most distinguished child of the Paladin of House Orlok of the Round Table. Among vampires, he was considered the scourge of the seas. He hunted for pirates and criminals to drink their blood. Those who saw him described his appearance as sinister and mysterious. A fearsome pirate with ghastly features, clad in tattered clothes. Of course, it was rare for anyone to see him. Those who encountered him or his ship, the Flying Dutchman, were doomed to a watery grave, their souls consigned to his locker for eternity. Many were puzzled by his ability to suddenly appear and vanish with his ship, and by the fact that he traveled so fast that it was impossible that daylight deterred him like other Nosferatu. But the truth is that during his adventures through the seas, he made a deal with a powerful necromancer. He received a cursed ship that could travel through the world of the dead during the day. Using this power, he could easily surprise his targets and take their blood and riches before he sent their souls to the necromancer. You see, both got something out of the deal.
A deal with a powerful master of magic. It sounds a lot like a Kimu.
You could say our house is a master at the art of negotiation, but as the Ronin said, Davy Jones has haunted the waters near Dreadford before. His ship has been reported nearby several times since the King's Court was founded here, but as a rare saving grace in our cursed eternities, he is not a problem to us. His crew has always been hostile towards the tower. I have heard from a Nosferatu of the Tower that their new leadership and Davy Jones have a long-standing enmity. And not so long ago, an elite team was formed to embark in a hunt for the Flying Dutchman, climaxing in them confronting him directly.
But what are the reasons he is drawn to Dreadford?
Anyone's guess. Some say he sought hidden treasures, while others believe he was searching for answers to questions long forgotten.
The White Ronin glanced at the goblin, then back at Tom.
We've given you some stories, and we helped you escape Spectre's death trap. There is no shame in having some help as you take your first steps as a Nosferatu of House Orlok. But now, it's time for you to get smart and take good care of yourself and your own.
The goblin nodded, a rare look of seriousness crossing his face. The White Ronin started to walk away, but he stayed for a moment.
You've got potential, kid. Don't waste it. If you need some work, just look for me. The Ronin is a hard ass, but I would not mind to teach you a trick or two that your sire should have done.
Thanks, I'll definitely take you up on that.
Goblin, are you coming?
Yeah. I'll see you around, kid.
Tom watched as the two Nosferatu went away. Both of them faded into the shadows as their presence became one with the night. He felt a mixture of gratitude and resolve. They had given him more than just stories. They had given him a lifeline in this dark, complicated new existence. As he found himself alone, he got lost in thought. The stories of Akimu, Orlok, and Davy Jones swirled in his mind, intertwining with his own memories and uncertainties. He remembered his family and the normal life he once had. The weight of this new reality pressed down on him, but he pushed back against it, refusing to be crushed. Despite not fully understanding why he was in this situation, he was determined to make the best of it. For his family, for himself, and for the Midnight Fiends. He could hear his father's voice in his mind, the familiar catchphrase that had guided him through so many challenges. Solve problems, give solutions. In Dreadford's public library, Julio found himself consumed by worry for his wife. He glanced at the clock in front of him, shattered into irreparable pieces by his hand in a fit of rage. He felt frustrated and overwhelmed. The broken clock was a cold reminder to him that time was slipping away. She needed her medicine made from vampiric blood, and if she did not take it, cancer would claim her life soon. Every second counted. The sounds of someone approaching behind him cut through the somber silence. It was Countess, one of Van Arden's children, and an older sister of his sire, Hendrik. Since his sire was destroyed by the tower, she was tasked to be his teacher in Hendrik's stead. Her expression was stern, her eyes piercing as she regarded Julio with a serious gaze.
That antique has been in our family for more than 150 years. My father brought it from the old world as a reminder that time was of the essence for his mission, not unlike yourself, right now. It stood in the halls of Maria Theresa herself, in the days she was challenged by Frederick II.
I'm sorry. I'm worried sick about Christina. I did not think.
Exactly. You did not think. Is Christina back now that the clock is destroyed?
He silently fumbled for words.
You and her have cost this house dearly. Do you even realize that? House Ashk'Ari has invested a rare right to blood on you. We took Christina in and provided her with care despite her reluctance. And don't you forget we lost Hendrik because you needed to visit her at the hospital. You needed it.
But I didn't ask for any of this. I didn't ask for Christina's illness, nor Hendrik's death.
Oh, poor thing. Have you just realized that there are things in the cosmos that are out of your control? That's your problem, Bloodling. In your desperation to control what you can't, you fumble around making rash decisions that cost others, and still, you feel the need to soothe your ego by playing victim.
I just wanted to save my wife.
The road to hell is paved with good intentions, Julio. Have you ever thought that maybe she did not want to be saved if it meant to live like this?
He closed his eyes and felt overwhelmed by guilt as blood tears slowly stroked his face.
Regardless, It does not change the fact that our house has been paying a lot for you. Our leader, Van Arden, has been working tirelessly to earn another right of blood for Christina to help you. Yet, all we've received in return are complaints, refusal to comply with the treatment, and your inability to learn a meager second basic element of ars sanguinis.
I am trying. I'm doing everything I can.
No, you are not. Instead of listening to your sire and focus on your studies, you are off goofing around with your little posse setting the city on fire, which is basically all you can do. Even the element of color, the one element you know you can't use in more sophisticated manners.
He had no response. Indeed, the politics and investigations were clearly derailing his studies.
To destroy is easy. It takes clarity and iron will to persevere and create.
She approached the broken clock, and in a whisper she recited an incantation, followed by a gentle blow of air over the pieces, and the clock was fixed.
We are doing everything in our power to find your wife, but if she is found, are you going to be ready to do whatever must be done, or are you going to continue in this sorry state?
No, I won't.
Feeling the weight of her words, Julio retreated to his room with a heavy heart and a sense of resignation. The next night, Julio found himself in a much better shape as he stood before Candace's magical study within the library. He knocked on the door, and when he heard her voice telling him to come in, he resolutely stepped inside. The room had a huge blackboard filled with intricate diagrams and formulas. Candace was deeply engrossed in her work with a huge orange crystal as she recited an incantation and allowed 2 drops of her blood to touch it.
Countess, I've been thinking about what you said. I need to learn more, to become better.
Are you asking for my help?
Yes, I am. Will you teach me?
The woman nodded, pleased by Julio's determination.
Very well. But know that I expect nothing less than your full commitment. Take a seat.
As he took his place, she began to wipe the board in preparation for their lesson. However, Julio interrupted her.
Before Hendrik was destroyed, he was beginning to tell me a lesson he never got the chance to finish.
Is that so? What was he teaching you?
About the history of House Ashk'Ari.
She appeared to be moved by the revelation.
I see. I can complete Hendrik's lesson.
Candace's expression was somber as she began to recount the ancient tale. Her tone carried the weight of centuries-old secrets.
In the ancient land of Mesopotamia lived a wise man named Utnapishtim, renowned for his wisdom and resilience in the face of great adversity. He survived a great catastrophe that engulfed many. His tale had reached the ears of Tiamat, the first Nosferatu. She was impressed and saw great potential in him. She sought him out and offered him a unique opportunity: immortality as the founder of a new house of Nosferatu. He recognized the potential for greater knowledge and understanding that immortality could offer. So Utnapishtim accepted Tiamat's offer and embarked into the quest she gave him, becoming the founder of the House of the Owl. Or, as our house would be called for the time being, House Utnapishtim. Despite the allure of immortality, Utnapishtim found himself grappling with the complexities and challenges of his new existence. He soon realized that being a vampire came with its own set of risks and problems. Despite retaining his wisdom and intellect, he was increasingly tempted by the darker impulses that lurked within his undead heart.
So even though he was wise, he still struggled with his vampiric nature.
Exactly. He battled to reconcile his thirst for blood with his desire to uphold his moral principles.
Julio nodded, absorbing the weight of Utnapishtim's internal conflict. Something about it felt eerily familiar.
One of the foremost concerns that weighed heavily on his mind were the Nephilim. The power they have over him and the other Nosferatu threatened to overwhelm his sense of reason and integrity. So he dedicated himself to studying the vampiric condition, striving to understand it better than anyone else. Some say he learned as much as Queen Tiamat. Some dared to say he learned even more. During this time, it was widely believed that magic was beyond the reach of Nosferatu. Yet Utnapishtim defied convention. He delved into the depths of vampiric blood, unlocking its latent power and pioneering the development of ars sanguinis. His mastery over the vampiric essence was so profound that even the queen sought his knowledge in the arcane arts. His next step was to look for a way to shackle the Nephilim within him, to diminish its power and influence. Through a painstaking ritual, he succeeded in mitigating the severity of the Nephilim's presence within. But the victory came at a cost.
Julio leaned forward, eager to learn more, and Candace's expression grew grave as she continued the tale.
Ironically, in binding the Nephilim, Utnapishtim found his own thirst for blood magnified. His once subdued hunger for blood grew into an insatiable craving, a constant torment that gnawed at his immortal soul. The Ashk'Ari are known for their unquenchable thirst, a trait that sets them apart from the other houses of the blood. You have a greater thirst than any Nosferatu around your age, and you always will. For this reason, other houses are cautious about allowing too many Ashk'Aris to reside in one place. We quickly become a significant drain on the blood supply.
Julio knew very well the immense thirst she was talking about. He drank a lot more blood than his companions, the other midnight fiends. Also, he spent a lot of blood in his practice of ars sanguinis, so he could see how the scarcity of blood could escalate exponentially.
This new insatiable craving made him very bitter with his immortality. He decided to turn into an hermit and rely not on his newfound powers as a vampire, but on the lessons of his past life as a mortal sage. There came a time when a warrior sought out Utnapishtim, yearning to uncover the secrets of immortality. Our founder, in his wisdom, cautioned the warrior against his pursuit. He spoke of the fleeting nature of mortal life, urging the warrior to cherish his humanity. After the warrior left, Tiamat came to visit him seeking his counsel. It turned into a debate. He warned her that she was threading a dangerous path and would lose herself to the Nephilim, as the other founders would also risk embarking on her plans. Tiamat was intrigued by his insight and questioned how he came to know of the Nephilim of the other founders. He proceeded to give her an explanation about each one of them. He spoke of visions, of whispers from the unknown, suggesting that their actions were not solely their own, but guided by unseen hands, perhaps even by forces beyond their comprehension. However, the queen would have none of it and urged him to join her and the other founders in their assault on the mages. Tiamat presented 3 compelling viewpoints to sway him. First, she invoked the memory of her murdered husband, Apsu, painting a vivid picture of the betrayal the mages had wrought. Second, she appealed to Utnapishtim's wisdom, highlighting the unchecked power and hubris of the mages. She knew he understood the dangers of any power that is for too long left unopposed. But it was the third reason that truly swayed him. Tiamat offered him the chance to shape the future of their kind, to become a teacher among the Nosferatu. She promised he would have the opportunity to share his beliefs, vision, and knowledge, guiding the coming reign of the Nosferatu towards a better path.
So it would be right to say that it was the prospect of influencing the future that drew him out of his isolation.
Indeed. Utnapishtim recognized that if the age of the Nosferatu was inevitable, he had to ensure the secrets he had discovered were safeguarded and available, lest the Nephilim of the other houses go unchecked. So he agreed to help her on 3 conditions.
What were the conditions?
That's the thing, Julio. The specifics of those conditions have always been a matter of debate among his children. No one ever quite agreed on what they were. Some say it was to ensure the protection of certain secrets. Others believed it had to do with limiting Tiamat's influence. But whatever they were, the queen must have accepted them, because he stood by her side when she returned. In the aftermath of the first strike against the mages, the golden era of the Nosferatu was established. Utnapishtim took the role of an intellectual. It said that he was the founder who least brought mortals into the blood, preferring to impart knowledge rather than immortality.
What about his children? What were they like?
Our Babylonites were truly remarkable, each gifted with unique talents that contributed to the legacy of our house. The witch, known for her mastery of ars sanguinis. She worked alongside her sire to develop the intricate blood magic practiced within our house for millennia. The exorcist, gifted with the ability to banish creatures from other worlds and the strength to combat other supernatural powers. The astronomer, a brilliant mind in the natural sciences, was known for his genius in observing the stars and developing technologies far beyond his time. And finally, the teacher, a timeless symbol of wisdom and enlightenment, who was solely dedicated to advancing the understanding of metaphysics, ethics, and the pursuit of knowledge among both mortals and Nosferatu. Our lodge, the House Ashk'Ari of Dreadford, came from the blood of the astronomer.
Our house and its founder, they go back so far. It's even hard to fathom. And our Sanguinis is such an intricate and detailed science. The depth of knowledge required to master it, it's astounding.
Candace's eyes narrowed slightly.
Insightful observations, Julio. But insight alone won't save you. You've mastered fire with ease, but your struggle with air is unacceptable. This isn't just about your personal growth. It's about survival. The four humors of our sanguinis allow us to cast powerful magic, but they also affect us. Too much reliance on one element can have disastrous consequences. You are already showing signs of excessive use of color.
Julio looked down, feeling the weight of her words.
I didn't realize it was affecting me that much. I just felt the power of fire was easier to grasp.
Ignorance is no excuse. You must start balancing it immediately. The effects can become irreversible if ignored. After this lesson, we will focus relentlessly on your training until you master air as well as fire.
I understand. I will do whatever it takes to achieve balance.
Candace's expression softened slightly.
Good. Now, let's delve into another topic of our history: the origin of our house's name. In fact, ours was one of the first houses to abandon the name of its founder. It happened during the rise of the Persian Empire, long after the age of the founders. At that time, the Magi, a priestly caste led by mortal mages, waged war against our kind with fervor. They had created a special military unit. One of their captains was a man known today only as Lashkar.
Lashkar is a Persian word for troops and soldiers, isn't it?
Yes, that's the reason the word was used to identify him. Lashkar was among the best of the Magi's soldiers, tasked with hunting down and destroying members of the House of the Owl. The Magi despised our Ars Sanguinis, considering it a mockery. Lashkar, driven by a desire to become a mage himself, served the Magi with unwavering dedication. He hoped to be rewarded for his loyalty by being granted the gift of magic. But his dreams were shattered when he learned from a scholar that mortal mages could not turn others into mages.
To dedicate one's life to a cause, only to have it crumble before you, it must have been devastating.
Indeed. Consumed by despair and betrayal, Lashkar confronted the Magi, demanding answers. When his worst fears were confirmed, he retreated to the desert, seeking solace in solitude. In his darkest moment, Lashkar encountered Paranda, a member of our house who offered him a different path. He could make Lashkar into a mage, but not a mortal one. He could turn him into a Nosferatu of the House of the Owl and teach him Ars Sanguinis. And of course, Lashkar accepted it. He was brought into the blood and rose to become one of the strongest among us. The hard work of the Magi and their troops had brought our house to the brink of extinction. But with his knowledge of the Magi's tactics, he led our house in a fierce counterattack. During the battle, the mages kept mocking him, telling he was no mage and was still just a Lashkar, for blood magic was no true magic. And when Lashkar, against all odds, secured his greatest triumph, he did something remarkable. He took the insult hurled at him by the Magi and embraced it. He made the insult his own, turning it into a symbol.
So the name Ashk'Ari, it was born out of reclaiming dignity from scorn.
This happened a long time ago. It was the last age in which our house was unified. Over the centuries that followed, House Ashk'Ari became synonymous with power, intellectuality, and arcane wisdom. Our members were renowned not only for their master of Ars Sanguinis, but also for their insatiable thirst for knowledge. We grew in number, bringing men and women of the mind into the blood. However, power breeds jealousy and conflict, and our house was not immune to internal strife. Rivalries and ambitions festered, leading to betrayal and treachery. This threatened to tear the house apart, and eventually, it did. House Ashk'Ari split into several lodges. As time passed, these lodges drifted away from each other, pursuing their own paths and goals.
That's tragic. To see something so powerful fractured by internal conflicts.
Yes, but despite the challenges we face, the legacy of the House of the Owl endured. It continued to stand as a bastion of magical knowledge and arcane might. Its name, whispered in both reverence and fear by those who sought to harness the power of the supernatural. Sons and daughters of its blood, wielding ancient sorcery and dark secrets passed down through generations.
Candace gazed on Julio with an intensity that mirrored the weight of the tale she was about to share. Julio, eager to learn more about the intricate web of Nosferatu lore, listened intently.
There is one very famous vampire closely related to our bloodline, and her tale serves as a stark warning about the perils of ambition and the importance of restraint. Have you ever heard of Elizabeth Battthory, the Blood Countess?
Elizabeth Battthory, a vampire?
Candace nodded.
Mortals often attribute only the latter years of her tale to her, but she is much older. Battthory was born around the 7th century near the Carpathian Basin. As a young woman, she was brought into the blood of House Ashk'Ari. Her aptitude for blood magic quickly became apparent. She possessed an insatiable curiosity and an unparalleled skill to learn our art. She accomplished something rare. She expanded our art in new directions and developed new rituals. Using her powers, she influenced mortals, playing their political games to accumulate power and prestige for her chosen figureheads. Accustomed to getting her way, she attempted something which was thought impossible for Nosferatu of our house. She made her grand ambition to reunify all the disparate lodges that had emerged since the time of Lashkar, to create a unified House of the Owl. Over centuries, she traveled across the known world, engaging in diplomacy, fighting adversaries, and bringing new Nosferatu into the blood. She offered secrets and the use of her powerful magic as incentives, manipulating the ambition of her allies and enemies alike. However, she was fiercely opposed by several lodges who cherished their independence. They would not bow to her ideal. This inner turmoil plagued our house for centuries, which only fueled Bathory's determination. She realized she would need more power to complete her goals. It was during this time that she developed and conducted immense blood rituals, reminiscent of the pagan rites of old.
So she resorted to bathing the blood of others?
Yes. She bathed in the blood of powerful mortals and Nosferatu to enhance her own power, and in the blood of young women to enhance her beauty. Rivers of blood were shed in her infamous activities. By the late 16th century, Battthory had adopted the infamous identity that made her notorious among mortals. She retreated to her castle in Slovakia with her closest apprentices and children. There, she plotted something monumental, but she got careless, and her actions led to a severe risk to the theater. Mortals discovered the horrors she had committed. This prompted several king's courts to intervene and maintain the veil of secrecy and misdirection that protect our existence from being discovered by mortals. This was no longer considered a matter of internal politics of House Ashk'Ari. All houses united to correct the situation. She was tried and convicted for her crimes. According to mortal records, she was walled into a room in her castle, where she supposedly died a few years later. For Nosferatu, it was decided that her apprentices at her castle were to be destroyed.
What really happened to her?
It is still argued to this day. Some believe she remains imprisoned deep within her castle, while others speculate she was destroyed.
Candace paused briefly, considering if she should continue.
Several lodges trace their lineage back to her bloodline, including ours here in Dreadford. She is the grandsire to Van Arden, and through him, she is one of your ancestors, along with his brother Arthur Walker and his child, our cousin, Valentina.
Julio's mind raced with the implications as he absorbed the information.
Hendrik told me our lodge was sent here for a vital mission. He said all our eternities rely on this mission being successful.
He told you about that, huh? Well, Van Arden was a Dutch privateer who served under a lodge headed by one of Bathory's children, Celine of Sinadenos. she harbored a long-standing grudge and engaged in a shadow war with a lodge from the Iberian Peninsula, whose most famous child is the Betrayer, the former king of Dreadford. When the Great Betrayal occurred, Selene sent Van Arden here with a mission to aid the city against members of the Lodge of the Betrayer. Our mission was to hunt and kill all Nosferatu who were part of it and affiliated with him.
Did they succeed in their mission? Hendrik seemed troubled when he spoke of it.
Yes, mostly. However, there were complications. You should not worry about this for now. Our lodge did assist the new council, which earned us a place in the King's Court of Dreadford, but with considerable reservations. Everyone was cautious about House Ashk'Ari after what the Betrayer had done. We work to this day to normalize our standing. And with this, we conclude the history lesson. The last teachings Hendrik passed to you are complete. Now we can proceed to the lecture on Ars Sanguinis. Today we study the humor of Erythros and the elusive element of air.
It was a grueling session of arcane theory and practice, but Julio was determined to see it through. They spent long hours practicing arcane incantations and studying old parchments. After Countess finished her lecture, she left Julio with a series of mystical exercises to practice alone. As the hours stretched on and the sun was almost rising, he still immersed himself in the intricate gestures and incantations that Countess had taught him. He focused intently, channeling his blood. The story of his house seemed to be immersed in ambition, magic, and blood. He considered his own ambition. The memory of Hendrik, his mentor who fell to the tower, weighed heavily on his mind. The image of Christina held at gunpoint flashed before his eyes, reminding him of the dangers they faced. His recent battle with the carrion eaters replayed in his thoughts, a testament to the perilous world he now inhabited. Amidst these memories, Julio felt a stirring within him, a deep-seated will fueled by a desire to protect those he loved. And then, in a moment of clarity, he felt it, the surge of energy, the subtle shift in the air around him. Julio had cast his first air spell. The incantation flowed from him with newfound confidence, and the air responded to his command. A gentle breeze stirred within the chamber, swirling around him in a testament to his mastery of his second element. For a brief moment, Julio stood in awe of his accomplishment, marveling at the power he now wielded. In the heart of the ancient forests of Dreadford, where shadows danced among ancient trees and whispers lingered in the mist, Eloise stood with Nayati beside a tranquil moonlight clearing. The air was cool and tinged with the scent of pine and damp earth. The night seemed to hold its breath as if awaiting what was about to unfold.
Who is Pamela?
Eloise. You have asked about Pamela, and I promise I will tell you everything. But before we delve into that, there is something we must do. It's better if we appease the wolf within us.
Eloise hesitated, her brow furrowing slightly.
Nayati, must we really hunt tonight?
Nayati's gaze softened. She stepped closer to Eloise, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder.
Don't you remember the lesson, Eloise? Why is it important for us to embrace the hunt and to release the energy that stirs within us?
Eloise closed her eyes. The memories of her early days as a vampire stirred within her, a time when she had first learned of the deep connection House Volkos held with the primal forces of nature. She recalled the night she had first sat beside Nayati at the reservation, nearby a crackling bonfire. The firelight danced on Nayati's face, casting shadows. It was so long ago, but Eloise remembered it clearly. Nayati's words were,
"Tonight, I will tell you the story of how House Volkos began. Our house traces its origin to Enkidu, and he was born a wild man. He lived in the untamed wilderness of ancient lands, where he roamed freely among the beasts. He possessed unparalleled physical prowess, and his senses were keenly attuned to the rhythms of nature. Enkidu was a creature of instinct, untouched by the complexities of human civilization."
The young Eloise's eyes widened as she tried to picture the wild man in her mind.
The people of Uruk, suffering under the oppressive rule of King Gilgamesh, prayed for deliverance. They believed that Enkidu could be a match for the tyrannical king. Shamhat, a priestess skilled in the arts of seduction, was sent to civilize Enkidu and bring him into the fold of humanity. Through her patient guidance and nurturing, Enkidu began to shed his wild ways and embrace the ways of civilization. He learned to wear clothes, to eat and drink like a human, and to speak in the tongue of men. Upon his transformation from wild man to civilized, Enkidu felt compelled to confront King Gilgamesh and challenge his tyranny. The two warriors initially clashed violently. Their battle shook the very foundations of Uruk. Yet, in their fierce struggle, they discovered a mutual respect and camaraderie that transcended their differences. Enkidu became Gilgamesh's closest friend and confidant, joining him on numerous adventures and battles.
Young Eloise felt empathy for Enkidu. She wondered about the bond he had formed with Gilgamesh, but her attention was caught once again as Nayati continued the story.
Rumors had spread of a sacred cedar forest guarded by a monstrous demon feared by all who dared approach, Humbaba. Unfazed by warnings and sensing an opportunity to prove their worth, Gilgamesh and Enkidu embarked on a perilous journey to confront the demon. Little did they know, the cedar forest concealed not only their target, but also the lairs of the ancient vampire houses. In the heart of the forest, they faced Humbaba, whose ferocity matched the darkness that lingered among the towering cedars. Through sheer determination and their combined might, Gilgamesh and Enkidu vanquished Humbaba, earning renown and respect across the lands. Their victory drew the ire of Ishtar, a legendary seductress and a founder of the Houses of the Blood. Ishtar desired Gilgamesh as her vampire progeny, but he had spurned her advances before, invoking her wrath. She demanded the intervention of the other founders, and they unleashed a monster cloaked in divine guise, the Bull of Heaven, to punish Gilgamesh and Enkidu for their boldness. Enkidu and Gilgamesh were undeterred by the creature's formidable power. They confronted the bull in a fierce battle. Eventually, through their ferocity, they slayed the Bull of Heaven despite its supernatural might. Still in divine guise, the founders observed the unfolding events with displeasure. They decreed that one of the companions would be punished for their audacity in slaying the creature they had sent. Shortly after their victory, Enkidu fell gravely ill. Unbeknownst to all, one of the founders used a special poison against him, causing his body to succumb to illness. To everyone, it appeared as if he was dying. In these final moments, Enkidu suffered deeply. He cursed those who brought him into civilization, including Shamhat, the temple priestess who initiated his change. He missed his connection with nature and the wild that he once had, but now were lost to him. He was buried with honors befitting a hero. But as the moon rose on the night of his burial, Tiamat emerged from the shadows. With a bite, she began the process of cleansing Enkidu's body of the poison. The queen told him that she had saved him, and that now his life was hers until he repaid the debt. She wanted him at her side when she returned to take revenge against the mages, and she promised that if he did as she asked, he would find once again what he missed the most about his early life. Enkidu was sent forth by Tiamat on a quest into the desolate desert. There he faced trials that tested his resolve and resilience. Through the crucible of adversity, Enkidu emerged a powerful vampire, with the power of the wolf at his command. The fury of the wolf, the power that would eventually be called the power of a berserker.
Did he find the connection with nature he missed so much? Was the queen telling the truth?
Yes, he found it. For the first time in a long while, he felt it again now that he was a Nosferatu and founder of House Enkidu. His longing for it was so intense that it was easy to lose himself in this connection. More than once, he succumbed to the fury when he was still young to the blood. To make matters more dangerous, Enkidu discovered he could gain strength from the fury, making it crucial to avoid berserking out of control. He pledged to balance his dual nature, wild and civilized, and develop techniques to manage the fury. When the day of reckoning between Nosferatu and mages finally arrived, legends tell that he had so mastered his dual nature that he was a terror to his enemies. Every member of his house inherits this dual nature, the power and the risk that comes with it. Just as Enkidu, we must learn to deal with the wolf inside, to control it, and make peace with it. The 4 children of Enkidu from whom all Nosferatu of the House of the Wolf descend are the berserker who learned to hone his fury into a battle trance in which he became almost invulnerable. It granted him unparalleled ferocity and power so he could tear through his enemies with his bare hands. The nomad who was a master at survival and capable of adapting to any environment. His knowledge of the land and its secrets was vast, and he could blend into nature seamlessly. The wild caller who had a deep bond with nature and its creatures. He could command beasts from the smallest insects to the largest predators. He also mastered the technique of shape-shifting and could transform into various animals and forms. And finally, the lore keeper who received the responsibility of keeping the techniques and knowledge of the house, so it could be passed down to younger Nosferatu. It is said she acquired an encyclopedic knowledge of lore, history, and even magic, and could recall even the most obscure details about it.
And from which of these 4 are we descended, Mother?
Our ancestor is the nomad, but there are tales of descendants from one of the other 4 here in Dreadford. However, that does not have anything to do with us.
Eloise felt a sense of fondness remembering these early nights. She opened her eyes and saw Nayati, still with her hand over her shoulder. These nights were long gone.
Yes, I remember.
Eloise took a deep breath, steeling herself for the ritual to come. She knew that tonight's hunt was not just about survival or physical prowess. It was about connecting with the primal essence that defined House Volkos, the House of the Wolf. Eloise could wait until after the hunt for the answer that she sought. She took off her jacket to give herself more freedom to move, and along Nayati, they moved with silent precision. Their senses, heightened to a supernatural degree, picked up the faintest rustling of leaves and the delicate scent of their quarry. They had found the trail of a deer, its path winding through the dense underbrush. Nayati crouched low, her eyes narrowing as she studied the tracks. Eloise mirrored her mentor's movements, recalling the lessons she had learned over countless nights. These moments, shared in the quiet communion of the hunt, were precious to her. Yet a shadow of fear crept into her mind, the fear that what Nayati might reveal tonight could change everything. As they continued their pursuit, memories flooded Eloise's mind. She remembered their first hunt together, the anticipation, the thrill of the chase, and the satisfaction of a successful hunt. More than that, she recalled Nayati's patient guidance, teaching her to attune herself to the rhythms of the forest. She remembered them both sitting near a bonfire, her heart filled with pride for her first successful hunt.
Well done. You have learned the ways of the hunt well, but there is more to our existence than the hunt itself. Tonight, you will learn the story of how our house got the name Volkos.
Eloise always loved Nayati's stories. They were filled with wisdom and history.
Long ago, our house was known as House Enkidu, named after our founder, a powerful warrior with a deep connection to nature. However, one of Enkidu's descendants, Bjorn Ironside, rose to such prominence that he had the opportunity to rename the house. Bjorn, the great ancestor to the Volkos of Dreadford, was born into the heart of Viking legend. He was one of the sons of a famed Viking chieftain and his wife. From a young age, he was destined for greatness and accompanied his father and brothers on daring raids and expeditions across the seas. One of his most famous feats was leading a Viking fleet, under orders of his father, up the Seine River to sack Paris in 845. It resulted in a hefty ransom paid by the Frankish king to ensure the Vikings' departure.
Eloise intently imagined the fierce battles and clashes of cultures on foreign lands.
But Bjorn's deeds extended beyond the shores of France. He embarked on an audacious expedition into the Mediterranean, sailing through the Strait of Gibraltar. En route, he and a brother of his raided cities along the coasts of the Iberian Peninsula, southern France, and even dared to lay siege to parts of Italy. Some tales claim he set his sights on Rome itself.
The thought of Bjorn's daring endeavors always stirred a sense of awe in Eloise. To venture so far from home, to command such respect across distant lands. It was the stuff of legends, but now, years later, she knew what it really meant. It was the stuff of nightmares, the sound of boots in the night, of fire and destruction.
After years of raiding and accumulating wealth and fame, Bjorn eventually returned to Scandinavia. According to the sagas, he ascended to the throne of Sweden, ruling from Uppsala with wisdom and strength. His reign ushered in a period of prosperity, as he ensured the stability of his kingdom. One night during a celebration in Uppsala, a shield maiden arrived. She carried herself with an air of ancient wisdom and power. She sought out for the king in a private moment by the sacred groves, and she spoke to Bjorn of visions and prophecies that foretold he was destined to be not just a mortal king, but a leader of our eternal house, the House of the Wolf. She offered him a chance to transcend mortality and unite the scattered tribes of their house under one king. Moved by her conviction and the promise of eternal power, Bjorn accepted her offer without hesitation. He saw in her a kindred spirit and was driven by the desire to unify the house and secure their legacy for centuries to come. Under the pale moonlight, she brought him into the blood of House Enkidu. As a Nosferatu, he discovered a newfound might that surpassed mortal limits. Using his strategic brilliance and supernatural abilities, he began the work to unify the disparate tribes of the house. After his success, he renamed our house in honor of his elite military unit, the Volkos Vanguard, instead of using his own name. Bjorn believed that the name Volkos, meaning wolf, perfectly captured the essence of our house. We are wolves, after all, creatures of both wild instinct and fierce loyalty. We hunt together, we protect each other, and we thrive in the wilds.
Why is he called Ironside?
He earned it thanks to his invulnerability in battle. According to the tale, his enemies claimed that his sides were as hard as iron and he was almost impossible to wound in combat.
Eloise smiled. She remembered how she wished to have her enemies claiming the same after she heard the tale of Bjorn.
One of Bjorn's children, the Wolf King, sired Abrantes, our progenitor here in Dreadford. Abrantes was born in Scandinavia but lived most of his life in Portugal. In his old age, the Wolf King came to collect the debts his family owed him and brought Abrantes into the blood. Abrantes became a well-traveled Nosferatu after his turning and had several children. I am one of these children. So is my older brother, the rancher.
Do you miss your sire?
Abrantes was very wise and ferocious. His loss at the Great Betrayal was a tragedy, Eloise. Most of my brothers and sisters also perished with our sire. Among his children, 3 remain. I am the youngest of them.
Eloise felt a deep connection to the story when she heard it. The legacy of their house was one of strength, unity, and an unbreakable bond with nature. It was a heritage to be proud of and a reminder of the duality that defined them. Thinking about this old memory made her realize this story still resonated with her. Eloise nodded, the weight of the story settling once more within her. She understood now why Nayati had insisted on the hunt before their conversation. It was a way to connect to their roots, to the very essence of what made them who they were, and that was what she needed. Eloise felt a renewed sense of purpose and belonging. The 2 vampires closed in on their prey, their movements synchronized like a deadly dance. The deer, unaware of its fate, grazed peacefully in the moonlit clearing. With a nod from Nayati, Eloise sprang into action, swift and silent. The hunt ended with the deer laying still and the 2 vampires drinking from it. Eloise felt the familiar rush as she drank its blood, the life force invigorating her. The wolf inside howled with satisfaction, its primal calling sated by the thrill of the hunt. She glanced at Nayati and saw the same satisfaction reflected in her eyes. After the hunt, they sat by a small fire her sire had built. The flames casted flickering shadows on the surrounding trees. Nayati watched Eloise with a mixture of pride and contemplation as they began skinning the deer. While they did the work, the fire crackled nearby.
Eloise, you did well tonight. The wolf inside you is strong and you handle it with grace.
Eloise nodded, focusing on her task. As she worked, a question that had lingered on her mind surfaced.
Nayati, you once mentioned that not all Volkos in Dreadford are descended from Bjorn and Abrantes. What did you mean by that?
Nayati hesitated, and her hands paused for a moment. She looked at Eloise, searching for the right words.
The rancher does not like to talk about this.
Don't you think you are already hiding enough from me?
Nayati sighed as her shoulders slumped slightly.
Very well. Have you heard of Leif Erikson and his voyage to North America?
Yes, the Viking who sailed to Vinland.
With his expedition, a Nosferatu from House Volkos arrived in this land. This vampire mingled with the native peoples of the continent, wandering from one corner to the other. According to legend, he sired a child known as Black Mane. This figure was said to be a guardian of the tribes, living in the wilderness, near what is now Dreadford. While some believed he was a spirit of the forest, others claimed he was a Nosferatu from House Volkos, the offspring of the one who crossed the Atlantic in Leif's expedition.
Blackmane was real?
Nayati nodded slowly.
Some believe so, apart from the legend of protecting the tribes under his domain. Blackmane was said to be part of Bertrand's crew, Abrante's oldest child in the 1800s. Many of the stories of his exploits come from this time period. However, the rancher refuses to acknowledge this. He insists Blackmane never existed and doesn't like talking about Bertrand either.
Why would the rancher deny Blackmane's existence?
The rancher always goes on about how he was already walking during that period, and he asserts that the legend of Blackmane is just that. A legend. A myth. But some believe it's his way of distancing himself from the past and the controversies surrounding Blackmane and Bertrand.
What do you mean?
Well, Bertrand was a real hero. He is said to have fought the Tower, werewolves, and even ghosts. If he was still walking among us, surely he would be our leader instead of the rancher. There is an epic tale about how he fought Andre Dulca, the Slayer. Stuff of what legends are made of, but others said he kept unsavory company, making deals with members of the Tower and keeping close relations with the Betrayer and his lodge. To be honest, no one really knows. Not even Jerome knows the truth.
Jerome? The Drifter? What does he have to do with all of this?
You don't know? Well, Jerome is Bertrand's only child, and he is the one who kept all of his sire's lore alive.
I never knew.
Jerome is sure Blackmane was real, and that he, his sire and their crew were paramount in the earlier days of war against the Tower. He talks about a wild vampire, even for Volkos standards, who refused to kneel to the king and refused to acquiesce to the Tower. He kept Bertrand's journals, and he says there is more than enough evidence on them, but the rancher keeps a tight lid on it. He doesn't like members of our house talking about it because it could bring the vigilant eyes of the court close to our house.
That's why he lives in the desert?
Nayati nodded in a positive manner.
And what happened to Bertrand?
He disappeared on the night of the Great Betrayal. His ashes were never found, so we assume he was destroyed in battle.
After they finished skinning the deer, Nayati finally met Eloise's gaze with solemn eyes. They stayed in silence for a few seconds.
It's time I tell you what you wanted to know.
Eloise paid close attention.
The rancher took meticulous care of his mortal descendants for several generations. He posed as an uncle and ensured their well-being and safety. His family had always been his pride and joy, a way for him to maintain a close connection to what he was before being brought into the blood. He diligently kept the secrets of the blood from them, yet he never let go of the family ties that bound them. One day, during a family reunion, someone tampered with his mind and made him lose control to the fury of the wolf. In his maddened state, the wolf took over him completely. He brutally killed his family and mortal descendants with his own hands. When he returned to himself, they were all dead, except for one of his great-great-granddaughters named Pamela McCoy. She was barely alive, death approaching every second. Trying to save what he could, he brought her into the blood and turned her into a Nosferatu. But he did not have the rights to blood at the time to do so. He knew that appearing before the council or king with such a problem would bring dire consequences for himself and House Volkos. So he left this child languid in a death sleep, hidden for several decades.
Eloise felt the weight of the pieces beginning to fall into place.
One day, I was awarded with such rights for bravery in combat. He asked me to take this child as my own and present her as if I had brought her into the blood. I refused at first. We argued over it, but in the end, I was convinced and accepted his request. This child is you, Eloise.
Eloise was dumbfounded. Her mind raced as she took a moment to organize her thoughts.
Why do I not remember anything?
Nayati sighed. She could see the wolf inside Eloise trying to claw its way out.
The rancher took you to a Drakul Nosferatu, who altered your memories to align with the cover story.
A wave of betrayal and anger surged through Eloise, and she lashed out, pushing Nayati away.
How could you? How could you lie to me all this time?
Without waiting for an answer, she left abruptly, her emotions in a turmoil, the wolf howling incessantly inside her mind. Nearby, Jacob was enjoying his dinner and saw Eloise storming away and tried calling out to her. Nayati approached him and gently put her hand over his shoulder.
It's okay, Jacob. We've said all we needed to say to each other. Now Eloise is walking by herself in the wilderness and will need to find her own way back home, or to build a new home for herself.
The Navajo warrior walked through the wilderness, the weight of her new knowledge pressing down on her. She needed answers. How did that Nosferatu of the tower know about this story? What more had they hidden from her? How could they tamper with her memories like that? She wanted to be by herself, but at this moment she realized she missed someone, Daniel. Maybe she had been too harsh on him, but before going back, there was a place she had to go. After a while, she arrived at the Nightmare stable. The rancher was sitting in a chair in front of the house, a look of surprise crossing his face as he saw her approach.
Eloise.
I know everything.
The rancher's eyes widened in shock.
How do you know?
It doesn't matter. I won't keep your secret just so you can hide your past sins. I will find a way to unlock my memories, all of them.
He reached out, trying to placate her.
Eloise, please. You don't understand.
My name is Pamela.
She turned away, leaving him behind as he stared after her, regret and sorrow etched on his face. Pamela now knew her past was built on lies, and she was determined to uncover the truth, no matter the cost. As she walked away from the ranch, she felt a new sense of purpose. She would forge her own path and reclaim her identity, embracing her true self, both as Eloise and Pamela. In Dreadford, within an old abandoned manor, where shadows danced with flickering candle flames, dwelled the child, a deranged vampire forever trapped in the body of a 7-year-old girl. Despite her youthful appearance, her playful demeanor and childlike speech masked a terrifying, chilling presence. Her small stature and doll-like features made her a peculiar sight, especially as she climbed up and down furniture, a task made difficult by her size. Her constant companion was a stuffed bear named Mr. Snuffles. Tonight, the long-abandoned manor was set for a special occasion, a tea party. The large, dust-covered dining table was adorned with a mismatched assortment of teacups and saucers, each delicately chipped with age. Around the table sat a variety of dolls and stuffed animals, their glassy eyes reflecting the flickering candlelight. 2 dead bodies were propped up in chairs, their eyeless sockets adding to the macabre ambiance. Andy, a criminal who had sought refuge in the manor, sat at the table, his eyeless sockets covered with crude bandages. His hands trembled as he listened to the soft hum of the child's voice. Across from him were 3 empty chairs and 1 tiny spot for Mr. Snuffles. With a mischievous grin, she placed a pair of sunglasses on Andy's face.
Now you look handsome,
she said, satisfied, jumping from the table back to the ground. The child struggled to climb into her chair, her tiny hands gripping the table's edge as she hoisted herself up. Once seated, she placed Mr. Snuffles in his designated spot and turned her attention to Andy. Her voice was high-pitched and sweet, laced with a chilling undertone.
Welcome to our special tea party, Andy. If you hold up and survive until the end, you'll receive a present,
she announced, clapping her hands in delight. Andy's voice was weak and filled with pain.
I need a doctor. Please, I need help.
The child tilted her head, her eyes narrowing as she smiled.
No, silly. You don't need a doctor. You need willpower. The world is not for the weak. Only those willing to go to any lengths, no matter what, earn their place in it.
The child carefully poured imaginary tea into each cup, her movements delicate and precise despite her small size. She offered the empty cups to the dolls and the dead bodies, maintaining the illusion of a lively gathering. Occasionally, she adjusted the positions of her guests, arranging their lifeless limbs to better fit her twisted vision of a perfect tea party.
Mr. Snuffles, would you like more tea?
She asked, holding the bear close and listening intently.
Oh, of course! Anything for you!
Andy, his senses heightened by the loss of his sight, could feel the weight of the child's gaze. He shivered, knowing that any sign of weakness would be met with her merciless cruelty. The child continued to chatter, her voice alternating between cheerful innocence and sinister malice.
I am so proud of my children,
she said, a hint of bitterness creeping into her tone.
But they never visit. They've forgotten all about their dear mother.
She rose from her chair and circled the table, her tiny footsteps barely audible on the worn wooden floor. She stopped behind Andy and climbed on a small chair, her breath cold against his neck.
Do you think they'll ever come back, Andy? Do you think they miss me?
Andy didn't dare respond, his mind consumed with the agony of his injuries and the terror of his predicament. A razor-sharp knife, perfectly suited for her small hands, flashed as she gently stroked his shoulder with the flat of the blade, her touch both tender and threatening.
If you survive, Andy, you might get to meet him. Wouldn't that be exciting?
She put the knife in his hand and left back to her place. The tea party continued, each moment dragging on as the child's madness seeped into every corner of the room. She engaged in one-sided conversations with her dolls and the dead bodies, her laughter echoing through the dilapidated manor. Andy's desperation grew as his body weakened. The child, sensing his decline, returned to her seat and addressed him with a childlike pout.
Oh, Andy, you're not giving up, are you? Remember, only those who persevere deserve to be alive.
She picked up Mr. Snuffles and hugged him tightly, her eyes never leaving Andy.
But don't worry, if you don't make it, Mr. Snuffles and I will still have lots of fun. We always do. To be alive is a gift, Andy, but not everyone is worthy of it. Well, as much as someone like myself can say to be alive.
Settling back into her chair, the child's expression shifted to one of nostalgia. She leaned back, clutching Mr. Snuffles tightly to her chest.
Once this house was filled with laughter. We were part of House Morrigan, a family of vampires with powerful psychic abilities. Yet our power came at a cost. It was our greatest strength and also our curse. Do you know how House Morrigan started? There's a story, you know.
The child continued, her voice suddenly animated as she spoke of the legendary founder of House Morrigan.
She was a remarkable one, you see, the daughter of a hero, though she didn't know half of it until she set out on her own journey.
Her gaze lingered on him with a mixture of fascination and amusement. Andy shifted uncomfortably in his seat, listening intently, his senses sharpened by fear and the lingering pain of his injuries.
Once upon a time, Andy, a girl named Sirius was born. She was the daughter of a woman, Shamat. Her mother always spoke of Sirius's father, a mighty hero who was a companion to the king of Uruk. This hero was known for his great courage and his wild heart, tamed by love. Sirius grew up hearing these stories, feeling a deep longing to meet the father she had never known. She had a gift. She was skilled in agriculture and brewing. She could create beers, medicinal drinks, and even a brew that granted her visions of the future. These gifts were a testament to her father's legacy, though she never knew him.
Andy winced, the wounds in his eye sockets excruciating. Despite the pain and fear, he unwittingly leaned forward, strengthening his grip on the knife. If only he could get his hands on this monster.
One day, driven by her longing to know her father, Sirius followed the tales her mother had told her. Using her brew to guide her with visions, she embarked on a journey that led her to a place hidden from the world. A place where vampires dwelled, much like how you found your way here.
Andy's heart skipped a beat, the realization sinking in. He had stumbled into a world far darker than he could have ever imagined. Would he have the resolve to escape? The child's eyes sparkled with dark amusement as she recognized the expressions on his face.
The founders of the vampire houses captured Sirius, wary of how she had found them when even the mages could not. She told them her story, and in her eyes, one of the founders saw a reflection of his own sorrow and love. Her father, Andy.
The child said softly, her voice tinged with an unexpected tenderness.
He was her father. Though initially startled by his vampiric appearance, Sirius was elated.
The child paused, allowing the weight of her words to settle in the quiet of the room. She then leaned closer to Andy, her gaze intense and piercing.
Enkidu, the wild man turned vampire, proposed to bestow upon Sirius the gift of vampirism himself. Tiamat, the first Nosferatu, was intrigued by Sirius's potential. She declared that if Sirius could prove her divinatory skills by finding and slaying the Nephilim, known as the Raven, she would be deemed worthy. Tiamat was displeased with the Raven's cunning. Everyone she had sent after it fell to its tricks and perished. Maybe a diviner could see through its traps and conquer the Ravens. At this time, Enkidu blessed Shamat, the temple priestess, who had seduced him when he was in his wild state. She had clothed him, fed him, and now bore him a daughter. Enkidu trained Sirius, preparing her for the hunt. When she was ready, she ventured into the desert, confronted the cunning Raven, and returned as the founder of House Morrigan. Well, at the time, it was called House Sirius. The transformation bestowed upon her great psychic gifts. The deal of the Raven, however, took a toll on her mind, leaving her somewhat unhinged.
The child's giggle echoed through the room, a haunting sound that sent shivers down Andy's spine. Andy nodded nervously, unsure of how to respond to the child's peculiar mixture of childlike innocence and ominous presence, and his grip weakened on the knife.
Sirius aligned herself with Tiamat's crusade against the mages, standing by her father when Tiamat rose to power. And in the ancient world, according to legend, Sirius excelled in trickery and also learned the art of shapeshifting into a mighty bird from her father. In this form, she sowed chaos and audaciously stole the tablets of destiny. During the reign of Nosferatu, Sirius was revered as a gifted prophetess. Her bloodline passed down to several offspring, each bearing distinct psychic gifts and curses thanks to the deal of the Raven. Those who refused the deal were not cursed but remained feeble and vulnerable. And what fate awaits the weak, Andy? They perish! The deal is invariably cruel. The Raven knows how to dispense suffering unlike any other.
She leaned closer to Andy, her eyes gleaming with a blend of innocence and malice.
You see, Sirius had 4 children who survived the fall of the Tower of Babel and the disappearance of the founders. They were known as the Babelites, the oracle who inherited the gift of divination, becoming a formidable seer with an uncanny ability to peer into the future. The raptor, who was feared among both mortals and vampires alike. He used his skills to track and hunt down other Nosferatu, earning a reputation as a relentless predator. The Maelstrom, who possessed immense psychic powers, also known for an unpredictable nature and for being lost in the tumultuous currents of said powers. And the Trickster, who is known for the ability to deceive and manipulate others with finesse. A master at the art of illusion and trickery, and adept at outwitting enemies. My mommy, when she was still walking, told me we descended from the oracle's lineage. I like that. She was the best fortune teller in this city. Oh, how I yearn for the power to see into the future. I just need the right pair of eyes.
Did you take my eyes so you could see the future?
His voice was weak and filled with pain. Andy could not believe he was asking such a question. The child giggled, sending shivers down Andy's spine.
Of course not, silly! I told you before, it was just practice. Some experts say you should visualize what you want or rehearse the steps to achieve it. So that's what I'm doing. Sooner or later, I'll get her eyes.
Andy winced, the knife in his hands shaking as he tried to comprehend the twisted logic of his captor.
Whose eyes?
She poured imaginary tea into the delicate cups, her movements precise despite her small size. As she handed out the empty cups to her dolls and the dead bodies, she continued.
Oh, there's also another version of the tale that calls Sirius by another name, Ninkasi. But I don't like that one.
Andy swallowed hard, his mind racing with fear and confusion.
Why? Why don't you like it?
The child pouted, her expression shifting to one of petulant annoyance.
It's just not as nice. Sirius is a much better name. Speaking of names, how about I tell you how the house got the name Morrigan?
Andy nodded slowly, unsure of what else to do. He felt weaker, dropping the knife on the floor and realizing his chance at survival was slim.
In the misty realms of ancient Ireland, Morrigan, once a mortal woman of unparalleled beauty and intellect, was transformed into a vampire by a member of House Sirius. She was welcomed into the ranks amidst a backdrop of tribal warfare. Morrigan swiftly adapted her immortal existence, honing her skills with her gifts under the guidance of her sire. Her ability to shapeshift into a raven, embodying the essence of our house's symbolic bird, became a hallmark of her prowess and influence.
Andy listened intently, trying to focus on her words despite the throbbing pain in his head.
As centuries unfolded, Morrigan's reputation as a formidable figure grew throughout Ireland. Her prophetic visions and manipulative cunning became renowned, influencing mortal affairs and shaping the course of history among both tribes and supernatural beings. Morrigan's interactions with Cuchulainn, the legendary hero of Irish mythology, were pivotal moments in her immortal saga. She tested his mettle in various guises.
Tested him?
Andy echoed, his voice barely audible. She paused, taking a sip from her imaginary teacup, her eyes never leaving Andy's face.
Yes, in various tales, Morrigan appears to Cuchulainn in different forms. An old hag, a beautiful young woman, or a crow. She tested his bravery and martial prowess. One of these tests occurred when Cuchulainn encountered an old woman at a ford. Despite her feeble appearance, she demanded that he carry her across on his back. As he did so, she transformed into a young and powerful warrior who wrestled with him. Cuchulainn defeated her, but not without difficulty, earning Morrigan's grudging admiration for his unwavering resolve. Morrigan continued to test Cuchulainn throughout his life, sometimes attempting to hinder or predict his fate in battles. In one tale, during the epic Tombacunya, she appeared as an eel, a wolf, and a heifer, each time trying to disrupt his efforts or predict his downfall. In another guise, Morrigan transformed into a stunning maiden, seeking Cuchulainn's affections. Despite her beauty and allure, Cuchulainn remained steadfast in his loyalty to his beloved Emmer, resisting Morrigan's temptations with honor and integrity. Morrigan's test confirmed Cuchulainn's status as a hero of extraordinary caliber. Her respect for him grew, and she recognized the necessity of his role in the unfolding events of Ireland's future. In turn, Cuchulainn's victories and moral strength influenced Morrigan's own actions, shaping her strategies in the Second Battle of Tag Turid, where she would become a legend.
What happened at the battle?
Morrigan's reputation reached its zenith during the mythical conflict between the Tuatha De Danann and the Fomorians. As their forces gathered for battle against their ancient foes, Morrigan's prophetic abilities and strategic cunning came to the fore. She foresaw the intricate patterns of fate and guided the Tuatha De Danann with uncanny precision, manipulating the threads of destiny to favor them. Her role in this pivotal battle, guided by insights gained from testing Cuchulainn, led to a decisive victory for the Tuatha De Danann. On the eve of the battle, Morrigan appeared to their leaders, offering cryptic prophecies and strategic advice. Her shadowy presence instilled both fear and reverence among her allies, who heeded her counsel as if guided by the hand of fate itself. During the climactic moments of the battle, Morrigan's interventions proved decisive. With her illusions and manipulations, she sowed confusion among the ranks of the Fomorians, weakening their resolve and bolstering the morale of her comrades. Her strategic brilliance turned the tide of the conflict, ensuring a resounding victory for her allies and securing their dominance over the ancient lands of Ireland. In recognition of Morrigan's profound influence and her leadership, the vampires of House Sirius' momentous decision, they chose to rename themselves House Morrigan, a symbolic gesture honoring their formidable leader and embodying the legacy of her immortal saga.
Even the paladin of House Morrigan at the round table of the king's court was a child of hers.
She leaned back, a satisfied smile on her lips.
And that's how House Morrigan came to be.
Andy tried to steel himself against the horror of his situation. He knew he had to stay strong, to persevere, just as the child had said. But deep down, he wondered if he would ever escape this nightmare. The dolls and stuffed animals around the table were frozen in their eerie poses, and the dead bodies sat stiffly, as if awaiting their turn to speak. The child, her voice a curious mix of childish glee and unsettling wisdom, leaned in closer to Andy, adjusting the sunglasses on his bandaged face, the lenses reflecting her eerie smile.
Only those who are worthy to weave their tale into the fabric of time. Will you be one of them? You're almost at the end of the party. Will you pick up that knife in your hands, or are you just gonna give up? Your gift is just around the corner. Now for the last tale of tonight. What do you think about Bolabon Sith? No, I think I'm going with the tale my mommy told me. It starts with a very old vampire whose original name was lost. But mommy knew her by the name Aveline. She was a guardian of secrets buried deep within her homeland, a Nosferatu shrouded in mystery and power. One day, a king, driven mad by his hunger for power and eternity, discovered the existence of Nosferatu. He sought Aveline's aid to become one of us, to gain immortality and the power of our blood. At first, Aveline refused him, but the king was relentless. 3 times he asked. On the 3rd time, Aveline relented, but not without warning him. He would regret his desire for eternal power. He had to promise that when he did, he would come back to her and assist her in her work. Once he was brought into the blood, the king returned to his kingdom, intent on using his newfound powers to build a mighty empire. But the curse inflicted upon him by the raven, perhaps it twisted his mind or his body in some insidious way, made it impossible for him to maintain his grip on power. He sought against the curse, trying to hold on to his crown, but in the end, he was cast out, branded as the Mad King by his subjects. The Mad King returned to Aveline, acknowledging her warning. Together, they formed an order of Jesters, a clandestine group of Nosferatu, each brought into the blood by another member of the order. The Mad King adopted the alias of the Ace of Wands, becoming their leader. A once mighty ruler reduced to a fool in the grand theater of the vampire world. All the other members also adopted names from Tarot Arcanus. They wore masks to conceal their identities, infiltrating other houses of the blood. Their purpose was to protect Aveline's secrets, to confound and make fools of those who sought to unravel the mysteries she guarded. Some of the Jesters defected from the order to the tower. It is said that they were terrifying and unpredictable figures, but even in their defection, they never revealed the true purpose of the Jesters and their secrets. One of these Jesters disguised himself as a traveling saint who worked miracles. It was he who brought Adelaide, my mommy, into the blood. She had lost her entire family to the Black Death and was gravely ill herself. The traveling saint decided she would make a suitable Nosferatu, for his own unfathomable reasons, so he transformed her. Nami spent some time within the order of the Jesters. Also, I mentioned before, she was a skilled fortune teller, so she became an advisor to many nobles, both mortal and Nosferatu. She balanced on a precarious edge as she had to uphold the theater. But she was smart and occasionally gave inaccurate prophecies so mortals would take her for a mere trickster. Sometime after she had left the Order of the Jesters, she arrived in Dreadford. She was the first vampire of House Morrigan in this city, and she was a duchess at the King's Council. My elder brother, Raphael, and I are her children. His line was known as the Wise Ones, diplomats, bureaucrats, politicians, weak fools who sought to earn favor by kindness. They tried being friendly and seeking respect from the other houses when the king's court hunted down House Morrigan. It was Raphael's branch that was annihilated. They were destroyed because they sought permission from others to exist. They were frail and naive, and as their reward, they were mostly perished. It was my children who survived. They knew how to embrace their darker side and be strong. They fought back. They fled away. They left me here, alone.
A melancholic silence settled over the room as the child's gaze turned inward, lost in memories.
My children, they're out there somewhere, building new lives, carrying on our legacy, but they never visit.
She straightened, her demeanor shifting back to a facade of childlike innocence.
Perhaps they fear the court's retribution. Or perhaps they simply forgot their dear mother.
The child rose gracefully from her seat, circling the table with a haunting elegance that belied her size.
But I remain here, in this old manor, waiting, always waiting, until the time is right. And while I wait, I have my tea parties. It's a lovely way to pass the time, don't you think?
She returned to her seat, her eyes fixed on Andy with a piercing intensity.
Now, Andy, remember what I promised if you persevered?
But there was no response. The child's gaze softened briefly, a fleeting moment of something resembling pity crossing her features.
Willpower, Andy. It's the greatest gift, but it's not for everyone. You don't want to live so fiercely. You wanted help, instead of helping yourself. I gave you the knife and everything. Unfortunately, you had the same weakness my brother and his children had. And he is not around to give you his gift.